All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the special council meeting for July 18th. As we're gathering here, it's 6 o'clock. We gather here acknowledging that the lands on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Coast and Straits Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen-speaking peoples known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and their historic connections to these lands and nearby waters continues to this day. First up, we just have approval of the agenda. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We have adoption of minutes. We can do all three simultaneously. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Are there any corrections, amendments, changes to any of those 3 minutes? I do not see hands popping up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We have then receipt of committee minutes and public hearing reports. So we have two here. I'm going to do them just separately, so I can't move the committee of the whole meeting for receipt. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. And then the public hearing report we received. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. I should just mention that we have a couple of our councillors away from the chambers here this evening, but both are participating remotely, so it's nice to see you, Councillor Appleton and Councillor Zelka. We have three rise and reports here. We can just move all three of them at the same time. Moved and seconded. Not really much for discussion. We're just acknowledging rise and reports that happened in camera. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Moving on to Mayor's remarks. If you just want to point out, if you're online and looking to call into the public participation period, this is the time to just, we can raise your hand within the Zoom app, or if you're online, or if you're just on the phone, I should say, or watching the YouTube stream, you can call the 1-855 number, hit the meeting ID and passcode, and hit *9, that is *9, not #9, to raise your hand. So I will get to you in the next section, which should just be about 2 minutes away. I just a few little odds and ends here. We have our Q2 financial report is coming just a little after this meeting, and so it'll be published on our website if people are interested in the state of our financials to date. That's a very detailed report that allows both council and the public to see where we're at. We have the pedestrian master plan feedback survey is active and online. And you may have seen some pop-up kiosks and things at some of the public events, but we're asking people to provide their feedback through that online survey. So please do fill that out if you have interest in our pedestrian infrastructure. We also have the infill housing survey coming soon. So that will run from August through to the beginning of the early part of September. We are going to make an extra effort to get notices out, so both in the paper and social media, but also with the mail out. So if you see something come through your mailbox that talks about it, please take that moment to sit down and provide us your feedback on the infill housing options. That will really help guide the next council as they consider those options. Last but not least, this is our last council meeting scheduled before a little bit of a summer break. I think through COVID, we've had a lot of work that's been happening and a lot of things being tidied up here, and it's going to be nice to have a few weeks off as a body. But so I just wanted to wish everybody here and online a very happy break. I also just want to point out there's many community events happening in the coming weeks, from the car show on the Avenue, the Bowker Street Brush Up Music in the Park is happening at Willows. We have the Jaguar show at Windsor. We have pop-up opera events at the various community sculptures and piano recitals at the various pianos. We have music in the village put on by the BAA and many more. So I will just leave my comments with saying I hope members of the public and members of the Oak Bay and our surrounding areas have a chance to come into Oak Bay and enjoy some of the many events that are going on. With that, I will turn to members of the public who wish to address council. This is a chance to speak to things not on the agenda. If you wish to speak to items on the agenda, we ask that you speak when those agenda items come up. But this is a chance to speak to council on items that are of interest to you that are related to Oak Bay. And so I will call on you this time. I did see a hand go up and that just went down again. So I'm assuming that was they were looking to speak to an item later in the agenda, but just in case that is not the case, if that person wishes to address council right now on an issue not on the agenda, you're more than welcome to do so and raise your hand again. Do we have any members of the public who would register to speak at the public input portion? I don't see any, and I don't see hands up in our system here. I'll give it another couple of seconds. Again, if anybody from the members of the public wish to talk to council, this can be about anything. Go ahead, Ms. Morden. I was going to swap microphones here. Go ahead, Ms. Morden.
Your Worship, we have one item in the chat on Zoom from a Carrie Smart who wishes to speak, but it has to do with the secondary suites bylaws. We'd probably wait till that item later in the agenda.
The intention would be that we'd wait to that item in the agenda, so that's perfect. If Ms. Smart can wait for that, then we will do so. So thank you, Ms. Smart, for being patient with us as we get to that item on the agenda. I hope you have a chance to sit on a patio in the sunshine while we go through the balance of the agenda. So not seeing other members of the public speaking at this time, I will move on to the section 8, which is reports and memorandums. And first up, we have our Facilities Management Program Master Plan Update. We have with us Mr. Haran, our Director of Engineering and Public Works. Mr. Haran, welcome this evening, and please feel free to provide an overview for us.
Yes, thank you, Worship, and thank you for the opportunity to bring you to the most up-to-date of the status of the district's facilities management function. So the key first steps in the facilities management program in the district of Oak Bay was back in 2016 when the district received the More Architect reports on the facilities portfolio, which unfortunately was extensive and a lot of information there, but wasn't actionable. There was just a list of challenges to overcome with no staff capacity to make progress in these areas. So with the exception of recreation, there were no assigned positions responsible for the upkeep and long-term planning of facilities in the district. There may have been many years ago, but any of that corporate knowledge is long since gone. So council's, as part of council's asset management strategy, the direction was given by the CAO to assign the authorities, responsibilities, and accountabilities for a new facilities management function to me as Director of Engineering and Public Works. And that led to a number of key projects and initiatives, which some of them are summarized in this report that's in front of you, such as the Municipal Hall Life Extension, which was completed on time and on budget, the Facilities Master Plan, also on time and presented tonight for information, the Todd House exterior renovation, also on time and on budget, the creation of a new Program Manager Facilities and Asset Management position, and a number of, and a summary also in this report of some of the support requirements that were required to make progress in the facilities function in terms of external consultants and resources to move some of these projects and initiatives forward. So for tonight's report, there are some key takeaways. The first one is the Facilities Master Plan activity culminates in a deliverable, a document which is on the agenda tonight. It's a living document, meaning it is meant to change and improve over time. It is an excellent first start to capture our understanding of the facilities portfolio. And it does have a key list of projects and deliverables for the next 5 years that are actionable and are required in order to make progress on their facilities portfolio. Some of the key items listed there are already in the work plan for this year. These include the Emergency Services Options Analysis Report, the Facilities Operating Model task, which is ongoing, and a number of the activities that are in the next 1 to 5 years recommendation in that Facilities Master Plan are being recommended to be referred to the 5-year financial planning process for adoption into the work plans in the coming years. So finally, staff are recommending that we come back, most importantly in 2023, early 2023, with an update on the program. And we'll seek at that time further direction about the deliverables and the schedules related to that facilities program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haran. And for those participating online, members of the public, if you wish to address council on this agenda item, this is the time to stick up your hand, either by calling the 1855 number, entering the meeting ID passcode and hitting *9, and we will get to you. Procedurally, we'll take questions of council, we'll receive the report, And then if following public input, we can have motions and then discussion on those motions to move things forward. So, but if you do wish to address council as members of the public, please raise your hand now, because we may get through this early portion. It may take a while or may get through it quickly. So just want to make sure that we're ready to go. So with that, are there any questions of staff on this report? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thanks for the report, Director Haran. Good report. I think it's pretty complete. I'm just wondering if you could just perhaps clarify a few things for members of the public that might not understand them. Could you explain the term a full spectrum facilities management function? What you mean by that?
Mr. Haran.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'll do my best off the top of my head and hopefully have a comprehensive list. Here goes. So the number one aspects of the function that we're trying to achieve is have a good understanding of what our portfolio is in terms of facilities. So for us, it's 55 facilities. Having a long-term life cycle management plan. So in other words, a plan for capital replacement of facilities, when and where, plus the savings program that goes into it. And then an operations and maintenance program, which means the upkeep and the life extension that happens day to day, year to year, to maximize the service life of a facility. And then a thorough council approved levels of service understanding about what the facilities are meant to do and how they facilitate the ability of the district to provide the services that are meant to be provided. I'm just trying to think if I forgot anything there. But that's so that means generally a certain group of people or portions of someone's time focused on capital renewal, capital projects, replacement projects. It involves a group of people or services that do day-to-day maintenance, such as replacements of broken toilets or electrical upgrades, that kind of activity. And then the work that goes into to making sure that the longer-term plans are fit in with the council's view of what the community services are meant to be.
Thank you. I think that was a pretty comprehensive list that explains it in better detail for those who want to know what it means exactly. Let me see what else. I guess on page 3 of 100, just could you define how you define a capital versus an operational facilities management? Is there a pricing break or?
Through your worship, that's a good question, and I think sometimes when we talk big picture, there are some big picture examples that make it really easy to understand, and then there's times where you pick an example and it starts to blur the lines. So if we're talking about a replacement of a large building like a rec center, that's going to be a capital job. If we're talking about a larger renovation project of a larger building, that's going to be a capital as well. But if we're talking about things that involve extension of life or maximizing the utility of the facility or keeping it running based on how it's going today, that falls into the operations. So I wouldn't pick a specific number, but at the moment our operational budgets for facilities are in the 50,000 or less range. Whereas the capital programs are in the millions of range. I think that's a broader, really vague answer. But I think part of the challenge we have here is that we haven't gotten to the point yet where there's a list of what we're planning to do. And then once you have a list in front of you, it's a lot easier to understand, well, this is operational work. So for example, changing out old light fixtures is an operational issue. It might be expensive, but it's an operational issue. Whereas redoing the ceilings or the roof in a facility might be count as capital based on the costs and the complexity. But I think we need to move to the point where it's quite clear what those jobs are meant to be multiple years in advance, and then it's quite clear what the plans are and where they fit into operating or capital.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful, just conveying to the layperson who is not as who's not been as involved in this in an in-depth approach as you have, to just understand the program kind of from their perspective. So thank you for that information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks very much, Mayor, and through you to Director Haran. This is a great report. Thank you so much. It laid everything out really, really well and was really understandable. I do have a question on primary and secondary facility rankings. And it really goes towards Carnarvon Park is where my interest lies, because we've had a lot of interest in Carnarvon Park lately. And I know in the report on page 21, it did note that there was a Carnarvon Park master plan completed in 2019. However, it says they did not see any evidence of capital planning budget to deliver this plan. And so when I look at the secondary list and I see the Windsor Park Pavilion ranked higher than the Carnarvon Park, I know that we're going to get questions from the public in regards to that. So is there anything that you could perhaps this is something for the next council coming in, but to somehow be moving something from the secondary list higher up the list or onto the primary list? What would be the process for that?
Mr. Haran?
Thank you, Worship. I think it's really, I'm glad that you noticed. I think the report talks about another facility as well that ended up in a place in the list that was a bit surprising from a staff perspective. It doesn't mean it needs to be changed. It needs to be understood why it's there, and that would be Todd House. And when we look at the broad portfolio of the industry, of the facilities that the district is responsible for, without having had this facilities function where we regularly come back to council to talk about priorities, the priorities have been just there, based in, and they happen organically year to year. Whether they're correct or not is another question. So now that we've started this process, we can identify that there may be some facilities that are a place in the list that maybe the community or the council, the community through the council wants to change where those are. But then there's now a mechanism in place coming in the future to talk about the trade-offs and the costs and what it might mean to make those changes. So from a district perspective, it also means that there may be some desire to have a specific project or a specific issue really given a lot of attention, but now there's some context within to talk about that as well, because perhaps it may not be as important unless the whole process is thought through. So in summary, though, there's a couple of points in the report that I wrote covering this issue, which was that this is definitely a first step in the process, which was covering mostly staff's input, which of course staff responds to council and council's direction in the community documents like the OCP and so on. But I think as the years go on in the next 2-3 years, especially one of the recommendations tonight is to come back to council next year to talk about this again. It's to seek some direction around, well, does council want us to engage the community more on this list? Is there specific direction around priorities or changes that are required, and are the service levels acceptable? And I think all those will drive priorities and focus in the coming years.
Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you very much, Director Haran. That explanation is useful for when we're talking to the public, and I think it gives the public hope that things could move on that list if needed. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. And just follow up on that, just for clarification, Mr. Haran. Just this report here tonight does not set a direction on those pieces. So I just want to make sure that we're all in the same agreement on that piece. This is an informational report that will guide the next steps coming back to council and to the public. Is that correct?
Your Worship, I think the only, there's some actions that are in the Facilities Master Plan which are already in the 5-year financial plan, such as a feasibility study for the emergency services functions. And so those ones, and the facilities operating model. So those have already, that's direction that you've already given, and we're going to complete that this year. And then what we're recommending is the next actions, we bring it back to you as part of the next 5-year financial plan to seek direction on those, whether that ties in with the priorities that the community wants, and whether there's that's acceptable, or whether tweaks or changes need to be made going forward.
That. Go ahead, Councillor Nay.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, to staff. Just a quick question about the Oak Bay Marina Complex. That's okay to ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
With some limitations, since it's still in active
sure.
negotiations, Councillor Nay?
Yeah, no, I'm really just, it pertains to exactly what's said here in the plan. It's on page 4, and it indicates that under the Oak Bay Marina Complex, that the next steps are dependent on outcome of a feasibility study. Can you speak to what that means?
Through your worship, the 5-year financial plan at the moment has in the capital program some funding in place, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's more than $1 million per year to do significant renovations in terms of facilities at the Marina Complex site. Not this year, in coming years. So this work around feasibility study for the marina is around coming up with an up-to-date list of what that work should be and putting together project plans for governance review at this table in the next deliberations around the 5-year plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I don't see other hands popping up, and I don't see any indications from the public that if they've indicated they wish to speak. I'll just go back out to staff to make sure. Nope. So back to this table. I think we'll do a motion to receive the report first.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Ms. Morden, you wish to add something?
Oh, Your Worship, I just noticed Councillor Zelka's hand is up in the Zoom.
Oh, it popped up now. Thank you. I will, before I call the question on the motion to receive, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. You can hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent report. Thank you so much to Director of Engineering and his staff for putting this together. It's excellent to see such a detailed report and a wonderful assessment to date. In going forward, I just wanted to ask, when would be a good time if, because I presume some aspects, I'm guessing some assumptions built into this report is a one-for-one replacement eventually in terms of maybe some of the feasibility studies. At some point, we may want to change those assumptions where we possibly either combine some of the buildings or maybe add some other functionality, such as maybe some housing. If we're going to replace a police station, we may want to add some housing above it or something like that, or an emergency building, put in some other mixed use. Just wanted to ask through you, Chair, to staff, when would be a good time for us to start looking at potential other options and maybe some different assumptions in terms of how to go forward on some of these building assessments? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Horan.
Yes, through your worship. The answer to that question is right now the information that we provided is we have some assumptions on current service levels, like the service that the district provides and the facilities that provide those services, and end of life for those. So the process going forward will be, we're assuming that there will be a significant capital projects to replace some of those larger facilities, such, for example, if the Ope Rec Center was at the end of its service life, we're going to start planning for replacement of that. However, long before a project proposal comes to council, there would be some work involved around there's a couple of names that you could call this process, either options analysis or feasibility study or business case, or sometimes all three of those things, which would talk about is there a possibility, for example, of a renovation project that would be a life extension, and what would be the cost benefits of that. There would be discussion of what are the options about replacing the facility or putting it in a new place, or what are the options about potentially closing off a specific service that a facility provides. And it's really up to council at the governance level to take in all that data, the pros and cons and the costs and the benefits of the different options, and provide direction about what a project should be to replace or to extend or whatever it is. So that's why the top priority buildings, for example, the ones that are closest to end of service life or already don't meet the needs of the community, such as the fire hall and the police station, are first on the list for this feasibility study, options analysis kind of investigation, reporting, and then discussion, and hopefully direction given by council about what the project should look like. And that would kick off the next phase of that definition of a project.
Thank you, Mr. Horan. Councillor Zelka, anything else?
Yes, thank you. So when I think in the what we're voting on is for this to come back in 2024. Would 2024 be the time when we would start to possibly look at detailed options going forward, and possibly adding some mixed use at that time, or looking at some of the other options certainly for the top 3 facilities? Just wanted to know some idea of timing in terms of what maybe the next council is looking at it, or to be 2 councils down the road.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Horan, there's 2 dates in here. One is the 2023 to 2027 financial plan, and the other is the other report. He's being brought back no later than Q1 2024. Can you maybe speak to a little bit about what's in those dates and what that looks like in terms of actual work on the ground?
Yes, Your Worship. So the first date, the 2023 to 2027 financial plan, is really around taking the actionable items in this, this first facilities master plan and funding them and getting council approval to go ahead and do that work in the next 3 or 4 years. And the 2024 timeline is around giving us a bit of time to make some progress in the program itself, to fill the vacant position with the program manager, facilities and asset management, and to make some progress in some of these issues, to come back and say, here's where we are in terms of the status. I think to answer very directly, if I can, Councillor Zelka's question, is I don't think that there will be the approach that we're aiming to take here is any significant renovation or life extension or replacement of a facility that currently exists, such as the bigger picture ones that would have the most community impact, wouldn't get beyond an options stage without council fully weighing in on potential uses of whatever the facility is. So, for example, the facilities master plan document talks about this building that we're in right now, Municipal Hall, having its life just extended. It's meant to be extended by 10 to 15 years. So in the early 2030s, this building will need to be replaced. So in the late 2020s, maybe even the mid 2020s, there would have to be some options analysis, feasibility study work about this building. And council would have to weigh in on, well, is it just going to be a municipal hall, or is this where the library is going to be? Is this the site where these things are going to happen, or is it other things that are going to go into a place that would also be a municipal hall, and whatever else is going to happen there, which is a little bit touched on in the more architects documents that were done in 2016, but now we're talking more specific proposals and requests for direction from council about what these facilities are meant to do for the community going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haran. Anything else, Councillor Zelka?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, thank you for mentioning the Moore Wilson Architects Report from 2016. It had some absolutely wonderful ideas that potentially could have and in some ways implied some additional housing in the public sphere. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what comes forward in the next year or two, and where council can weigh in on and where we could find some funding and how we could move some of these ideas forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you. Just in looking at the buildings and how they are listed, public works buildings, of course, are there, and wondering what discussion, if any, has taken place about the existing public works facilities as compared to what might be required if we can successfully implement a more aggressive asset management program, and arising out of that asset, the infrastructure asset management program, the preventative maintenance program that will then go along behind that. And so wondering what discussion, if any, has taken place about assessing the needs of the public works facilities to fit with all of those programs.
Mr. Haran.
Thank you, Your Worship. The public works yard, so parks and public works both operating out of there, plus the Elgin Street drop-off depot, equipment storage, and lay down for material and so on. That whole function, plus the customer service aspect, will make up part of the feasibility study that's done for that yard. So that yard, the Public Works and Parks facilities, is don't have it in front of me, but I think third out of the top 3, top 4 in there, and meant to be, so that analysis work to be done starting next year, if I recall correctly. So there's a number of other issues that we would like to address as part of that larger project, such as drainage right now into Bowker Creek, such as underground fuel tanks, such as a number of other issues that can be lumped into that project. So there's a handful of historical legacy problems that we'd also like to address in terms, and I think the feasibility study is gonna look at those options and provide that as part of the business case going forward for the different things that could be done on that site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that's great, because really that's going to be pretty central to so much activity that's going to be going on in the communities. So certainly those pieces are quite important. So I really appreciate knowing that how fulsome you're going to be looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We have a motion to receive at the moment, and we'll deal with other suggested motions here. But comments or questions are still welcome. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And just generally, thank you very much, Mr. Horan, through you, Mayor, for the report. Really appreciate it. I also want to respond to a comment made by Councillor Braithwaite. I agree that Carnarvon, I remember when we toured the site at the very beginning of this term, and we were all very concerned about its future and its current state. And I'm hoping that we can really look at that as a stronger priority for the next council term, because it does serve so many people and so many families. And you know, Mr. Moore that wrote in, he was very strong in his commentary, but I could sense the frustration, and we've all talked about this, but when we spend so much time on pickleball and not enough time on a multi-use park, I think that does send the wrong message to the community. So I really look forward to focusing on Carnarvon Park and the master plan, and also engaging the community who live in that area, because I think they're feeling, rightly or wrongly, somewhat neglected and overlooked. And I think that's really important that we do prioritize some of these strong programs that we have for families generally and other users. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Just for anybody paying attention to this, the buildings and that are included in this report. The parks themselves are not, so it touches on a multitude of pieces. So if people are looking for the Carnarvon master plan in here, they wouldn't find it, but that's key to one of the buildings in here.
But it's all infrastructure, correct?
It is all infrastructure, absolutely. All right, we have a motion on the floor. I don't see other hands on this. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We have two other recommendations here.
Would you like them both at once, or?
Sure.
I move that the activities identified in the facilities master plan as the roadmap for years 1 to 5 be referred to the 2023-2027 financial plan process, and that an update on the facilities management program and the implementation of the facilities master plan be presented to council no later than Q1 of 2024.
Is there a seconder? Seconded, thank you. Any other discussion on those motions? I don't see any. I'll just express my appreciation to staff for this. It's been a while since we've had a chance to touch on our facilities, and so there's been some in-depth questions here to kind of walk through some of these, because it's been a while. But it's nice to see these things being moved forward, and we're certainly looking forward to those requisite skill sets for management of all this coming in-house and being able to tackle that. So don't see any other hands, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to item number 8.2. With this, we have Dalhousie sanitary and storm replacement. Again, this is available for public input. If anybody wishes to address us on this matter, I would ask that you raise your hand either within the Zoom app or if you're watching on the live stream, calling the 1-855 number, following the prompts, and then hitting *9 to raise your hand. With that, I will invite Mr. Rennick, our manager of engineering services, to the table to provide a brief overview. Welcome, Mr. Rennick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So every year over the past council term, there has been an increase in the capital output that the Engineering and Public Works Department has been able to provide. And in order to continue increasing the capital output year after year with the existing workforce, each year there have been a number of construction projects that have been put out to tender for external contractors to deliver. So this project on Dalhousie Street, replacing approximately 400 meters of sanitary sewer and 250 meters of storm sewer, is the second major construction tender that the district is running this year, after the Windsor Road sanitary sewer phase 2, which this council approved the award of a couple of months ago. Now, because of timing around the council summer break and the anticipated amount of this contract being in excess of the Chief Administrative Officer's authority to award. We are seeking early approval from this council to award the contract to the successful bidder for an amount not to exceed $1,550,000, which was the estimated cost that was prepared for us by Herald Engineering, who have designed the project. The reason that we are seeking this early approval is so that the contract can be awarded sooner, construction can begin sooner, and we hopefully have less of an issue with delays associated with unfavorable weather if we get working later into the fall season. I also note in the report that if this contract is awarded, it is likely that the amount for sanitary sewer rehabilitation in the 5-year financial plan will be exceeded. And so the companion to the recommended motion is that the Director of Financial Services be directed to amend the budget for sanitary sewer rehabilitation. And that would not happen tonight. That would happen at a meeting in September following the break. And at that point in time, we will have awarded the contract and we'll have the exact amounts so that we know what we're looking for. And so there's 2 recommendations. Essentially, there's 2 options. The recommendation is that the early approval be made to award up to $1,550,000, or there's another option where staff is directed to hold and come back to council in September once the tendering has completed. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rennick. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Rennick, thank you very much for the report. And just a quick question. You may not be able to answer this. I don't know where is Mr. Payne online tonight? I just wondered, with the amendment to the financial plan that is proposed, will that have an impact on the tax rate that we have just set? Thank you.
I think Mr. Rennick can answer that. Go ahead, Mr. Rennick.
Yes, so Director Payne is not available tonight, and I believe that he has indicated to me that this could potentially be funded from reserve as opposed to taxation, but I don't believe that decision has been made at this time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. The motion does include a wording to be funded by reserve if necessary, so it's listed there as part of that. I'll go ahead, Councillor Zelka, and then Councillor Patterson.
Oh, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask if there's any, with respect to this work being done in the Dalhousie, what's the area it's being done in? Dalhousie, Cavendish, and Hampshire Road area. I understand that that's the general area where this work is being performed towards, and it sounds like it's going to start sometime at the end of the summer. I note that 1 block south of there along Bowker, the CRD is planning on doing the Bowker Street, Bowker Sewer rehabilitation work, which appears to be scheduled for approximately the same time. I just wanted to ask you, in terms of coordination and traffic and potential upset of neighbors, whether what it may or may not look like, and how we will be able to facilitate things to minimize the impact on neighbors.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. Go ahead, Mr. Rennick.
Thank you, Mayor. The Bowker Sewer Relining Project that the CRD will be undertaking is not what we would refer to as a conventional replacement. So that means that it doesn't require ripping up the entire road. They would be setting up equipment on top of manholes and essentially having their pumps and their trucks and everything set up on top of one manhole and lining towards the next one. So it's not as disruptive to the traveling public as a conventional replacement like the one that we'll be doing on Dalhousie. We certainly do our best to coordinate construction projects, but the summer and fall construction season is only so long, and this is a project that was identified as being needed to be done, and so we will certainly do our best to minimize impact to the public and work with the CRD on that.
Very much appreciate that. Thank you. I'm also pleased to see that sidewalk replacement is generally also included in this sort of work, because some of the sidewalks in that area are asphalt, so and tripping hazards. So I very much appreciate that at the end of this process, it should be a much safer and much more a better experience for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I think overall I'm supportive of the recommendation that staff is making. It seems to make sense. I also appreciate Councillor Zelka's comments. I know on earlier projects where the CRD was doing work and we were doing work, I remember going around in circles and having to backtrack all the way to Lansdowne and come down Beach Drive to get back to the village, which is not a huge distance in Oak Bay, fortunately, but it would have been nice to know at the time I left Lansdowne and trying to get to the village. So I think hopefully our communications will be refined for these projects. But my question really is, it does seem late to be trying to bid and award a contract for this year for this type of work. So I'm wondering if Mr. Rennick could perhaps provide us with target dates for start and completion of the project.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Rennick.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to the council. The anticipated start date, which is of course subject to the bids coming in under the approved amount, would be approximately the 1st of September. We would be anticipating a construction duration of 3 to 4 months, so basically wrapping up by Christmas time, with the possibility that some aspects of the work get delayed into the new year. Most commonly, that would be finishing the top lift paving, which was the experience that we had on Kings Road project 2 years ago and also on Windsor Phase 1 last year, where essentially at the end of the project, you're left with a road that's passable but hasn't had the final lift of asphalt applied because you need to wait for nicer weather. I take the comment that it's a late start, and it's just trying to do all of these projects. They have to be done sequentially. We did Windsor first, now we do this one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rennick. I don't see other hands with questions. I just have one question, and that's just the details aren't here, but I'm curious about the when they're doing the sidewalk replacement. There's some of those areas, and I'm not sure about the specifics of Dalhousie at that end, but some of them have fairly narrow sidewalks dating way back. Are these replacing like with like, or to a current standard, or do we have a sense of what the replacement is on the sidewalk side of the equation, Mr. Rennick?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I don't have those details in front of me, but the intent was to replace narrow sidewalks up to a more modern standard.
Thank you for that. All right, I don't see other hands. This is open for public input, but I haven't seen any other hands popping up on that front. I'll just look to staff to see if there's any other hands going. I don't see any. Thank you. So with that, we'll just start with the motion to receive.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We then have the motions that are laid out here in terms of recommendations. Perhaps we'll test those first, and if there's not support, we'll move to the alternates. Is there a mover and seconder for those two? Go ahead, Council. Moved and seconded? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any discussion on those two items? Option 1, yeah. So this is given delegated authority up to 1.55 million, and then the authorize the expenditures funded by reserve. I don't see any other hands. I don't. So I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Best of luck with that project. That's not a small one. I appreciate every time we do one of these, we learn lessons about notifying neighbors and opening communications and managing traffic and those things, and it seems to get better each time. So I appreciate the work that's been going on as we undertake these projects to keep making it better. Item number 8.3, we have a memorandum of understanding, also available for public input. If anybody wishes to address council on this matter, please call in the 1855 number at this time, or in the Zoom app, raise your hand. I believe we have Ms. Williams just giving a brief overview. Welcome, Ms. Williams. For those at home, Ms. Williams is our Chief Administrative Officer. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report in the agenda prepared by Mr. Coates provides some of the details of the request before Council. Essentially, there's a memorandum of understanding that establishes a committee that and protocols for fundraising to resurface the Jack Wallace Memorial Track. One of our members of Council sits on that committee as appointed by the body. The intent of the signature that we're requesting tonight is simply because the district is named as an owner on the property. We will not be conducting the active fundraising activities described in the Memorandum of Understanding. Council has previously provided funding through a resolution of Council for that purpose. So if you have any other questions, I could respond to those.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. I'll take any questions of members of Council. Don't see a lot of questions popping up here, so that's fine.
A question from Councillor Zelka.
Oh, sure. Sorry, Councillor Zelka. You are shrunken on my screen here because of the oversized dial-in notification. So please go ahead.
All right, no worries. Thank you so much. Looking at the actual attachment and the what appears to be sort of MOU contract, I see a place for Councillor Braithwaite's signature, but I don't see a place for any other member from the District of Oak Bay's signature. Would it be executing this document, or would it be executing some other document, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Zelka. Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship. The authors of the document did include the committee members as signatories, but we have asked for the document to be redrafted with the corporate officer's name. That's our protocol here at the district. So it will be this document and the corporate officer that will be asking for the signature.
Thank you very much. If I may, does anything need to be done with respect to land title or anything registered on land title, or is this already done? I just wanted to know whether anything would be changed with respect to that.
Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there's been no need arise that we would have to put notice on land title. The committee will conduct the fundraising. If they're successful in achieving the amount that they're seeking, they will then resurface the track. So not unlike if the district were to resurface it, we wouldn't include anything on title for that either. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to see if there's any members of the public. I see nobody on my screen. Nope, no members of the public have reached out to us on this one. I would like to just express my appreciation to the school district and most notably the Oak Bay High School Alumni Association, who were so instrumental in getting this off the ground. But there's been so many, I can't even list them all. Rotary, Oak Bay Fire, Charitable. There's been so many that have been active in this fundraising, and I appreciate you, Councillors Braithwaite. I know you did this kind of outside of your council duties, asked to sort of participate. So I do. There's so much work going on in this, and I'm very confident it'll be successful. Although the price keeps raising, it seems, on a minute basis for construction. All right. So there's a recommendation here. Perhaps we can have that moved and seconded. First of all, just do receipt if we can. Moved receipt as our seconder. Moved and seconded for the report. Thank you. Any discussion on that and receipt? All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. And then that the second part of that recommendation. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Oh, Councillor Zelka, you had a hand pop up. You're muted.
It's a point of information. I voted in favor, and so this is after the voting, if I may.
Please go ahead.
So it's more of a question. If someone wishes to donate to this worthwhile cause, how would one do that?
That's a great question. I'm going to turn to Councillor Braithwaite, who has been actively engaged in this.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, Councillor Zelka. Yes, all the donations are going through the school board or through Oak Bay Rotary, and they are tax receivable.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Councillor Braithwaite. I think that information is available on the Oak Bay High Alumni Association website as well. We are moving on to section 9, which is bylaws and permits. These are items that are not subject to public input. So we have a series of these, and I will just going to walk through them in order. We have first up 9.1, a development variance permit for 2335 Estevan Avenue. This has been moved, seconded, and had third reading, and we're looking for a motion to approve. Do we? Okay. I don't think we normally do an overview of this in this state, just because we're piece. But Mr. Bold, did you wish to provide any overview?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Mr. Weber is available if more information would be needed by Council, and he might have a couple of words to introduce or refresh this item for you or for the public.
Okay. Well, I certainly don't want to not give them that opportunity for the piece. Procedurally here, just before I do that though, because I don't want to go do things unnecessarily in terms of time use. So, Ms. Morden or Ms. Williams, is there any advice here in terms of should I go and just provide a quick overview? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to Mr. Weber. If there's anything new, I'll ask him to provide it, and if there's not, then we'll just come back to this table. So welcome to the table, or to the meeting, Mr. Weber. And is there anything new that's changed since council considered first three readings of this bylaw, or the DVP, I should say?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to clarify, the first agenda item here is in item 9.1 is a development variance permit for 2335 Estevan Avenue, which is different than the zoning bylaw amendment for 2367 Estevan Avenue, which is a little bit further down on the agenda.
Right, you're right. I was talking about the first three readings. That never happened. This is a development variance permit that went out for notice and is here. So thank you for that clarification. My apologies procedurally. Is there anything else, Mr. Weber, you'd like to add?
Certainly. I'll just provide a brief overview of the application as well as the results of the mail-out. The District of Oak Bay is in receipt of development variance permit application to vary provisions of the parking facilities bylaw for the property located at 2335 Estevan Avenue. The requested variance would relax the requirement for 1/2 the required parking spaces for a dwelling unit to be located within a building. And if approved, the 2 required parking spaces for the residents would be located within an existing driveway on the property behind the front face of the residence. Staff presented the application to Council at the June 28th, 2022 Council meeting, and in line with staff's recommendation, Council directed that staff issue notice of its intent to consider the development variance permit for approval. Notice was subsequently mailed to 47 adjacent property owners and tenants within 50 meters of the subject property on July 7th. And as of the date of this meeting, 2 letters of support for the application has been received. The applicant additionally has undertaken some neighborhood consultation and has provided 3 letters of support for their application. Staff recommend that development variance permit DVP 00121 for the property located at 2335 Estevan Avenue be approved and are requesting council direction on this application. I'm available this evening to answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe the applicant as well is available if there's any questions, having considered this prior. I'll do with the motion to receive first then, or moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? And then we get to the recommendation, moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any discussion or consideration on this application? Just giving a second. Nope. No, I don't see any hands popping up. I was giving giving it a couple extra moments for those online. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. The DVP for 2335 Estevan Avenue has been approved. Thank you very much to the applicant for coming in tonight. We have next up number 9.2. This is a zoning amendment for 1391 Oliver Street. This probably just does a little reminder in terms of process because it's a little outside the norm. And is Ms. McDougall joining? Yes, she's here. Ms. McDougall, why don't you provide a little overview of procedurally what we're managing here tonight?
Thank you so much, Your Worship. Just want to confirm a sound check here. Can you hear me okay?
You're coming through loud and clear. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so before you for further consideration this evening is zoning bylaw amendment application zone 00041 for 1391 Oliver Street. The development proposal includes rezoning a portion of 1391 Oliver Street to facilitate subdividing the large lot into 2 smaller single-family lots. The Just to keep it short, I guess I'll just summarize that a public hearing was held on July 14th. Minutes of the public hearing are attached for information. Following up on some of the comments from the public hearing, staff recognized that the subdivision would result in the new property line being located approximately 2.5 feet away from the covered entryway in the south yard. The standard interior side yard setback for the RS5 lot is 1.52 meters or 5 feet. However, the major portion of the house will be set back approximately 3.5 meters or 11.5 feet away from the new property line. So this is more than double the standard RS5 interior side yard setback. And I think we just wanted to finally point out that it's because of the rezoning that the applicant has voluntarily agreed to enter into a heritage bylaw without requiring compensation from the district. Without the heritage designation bylaw, the property could be redeveloped in a way that might not be as in line with the OCP policy objectives. So in summary, the zoning and heritage designation bylaws work together to preserve the existing heritage property and allow subdivision of the site in a way that is keeping with the neighborhood character. And if council chooses to proceed with third reading of the bylaws today, a draft covenant will be brought back forward for information with final reading of the bylaws in September. I hope that quickly covers everything that needs to be said, but I can certainly answer any questions you might have.
No, I appreciate that, Ms. McDougall. I just, our normal process would be that we do third reading and adoption following a public hearing. So because we're delaying it, I think it's just helpful to kind of review that process. We have a number of recommendations here, starting with receipt. But if there's questions of Ms. McDougall, I think this is an appropriate time to do it before we get to the motions themselves. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much. And I do apologize if this was already covered. Unfortunately, being ill, I missed the public hearing, so I'll do the best I can. Just wanted to know with respect to the, and hopefully it's okay to ask this question, with respect to the new lot that will be created, will council have control over site and character of the building that's going to be put in on the new lot?
Ms. McDougall?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is correct. The new lot will be subject to infill development permit area requirements. So any new building will need to come forward through council for approval.
And just to confirm, when that building comes back, if we find maybe it's too close or it is somehow impinging upon the heritage aspect of the other building, that would be the time that we would say anything about that.
Ms. McDougall, perhaps you can also just highlight the key point of that covenant that's being drafted up.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, siting considerations would definitely come into consideration with a development permit application. The standard setbacks would typically apply, but in this case, we've also, the applicant has agreed to enter into a covenant that would create an additional further back setback on that interior side lot line. So essentially creating greater distance and separation between those two buildings beyond what the standard RS5 zone would require. So doubling it from 1.52 meters to 3 meters.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I have just one question for you, Ms. McDougall, and on the part of the covenant. I know that the covenant is primarily focused on that setback, but also prevents structures such as fences being built within a portion of that. Just for my clarification, is the restriction on those sorts of non-building permit structures like a fence, does that carry all the way from the front to the back of the lot, or is it really just, is it the front part of the lot that affects sight lines to the house?
Yes, as currently discussed, we were intending to apply the restrictive area basically along the entire duration of the property line. If council wishes to see something else, I'm sure the applicant is here today. They can speak to their willingness to participate in that, but we can certainly try to negotiate that. In terms of the sight lines, I think it's more about what's between the existing house and the new property more so than maybe the sight lines from the street. But I can certainly take direction from council on that one.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McDougall. It just occurred to me that as time goes on, that the fence line at the back of the house probably most logically sits on the property line, where it doesn't affect anybody but the two people adjacent. But I will, maybe that's a level of detail at this meeting that we don't need to get into, that can be dealt with. But I might suggest that there's some mechanism there for, I don't know, I don't want to necessarily give direction in the middle of this when we don't actually have the covenant in front of us. So I'll just, I'm just raising it as a thought, because it seemed to me that that fence, at the end of the day, over time, most logically sits on that property line, and if it doesn't affect anybody but the two neighbors, doesn't affect the heritage property, probably shouldn't restrict that. We have the applicant here. Perhaps I might just, Mr. Miller, perhaps you could just touch on that. There was that was drafted up, as I understand, front to back originally. Is there a rationale for having that limit all the way to the back of the property? You just have to unmute. There we go. Welcome, Mr. Miller. Here's the applicant.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it was just a general idea, I think, as Ms. McDougall mentioned, was to keep the separation between the two houses. I think at this point we haven't got into any more discussion around. The thinking was along the length of the property line, but certainly if council wanted to look at something a little differently, we could certainly discuss that.
Right, thank you. In fairness, that's fair. I think if the primary concern is the setback of the building, then that is appropriate. I think the question I have is just because it also was talked about addressing the fence, that might not make sense in time as the two properties at the back of the property may want to set the fence up along the property line. All right, well, I'll leave it there. I think there's no need to change anything here. We don't have the covenant in front of us. We're just dealing with the readings. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the receipt? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Yeah. Do we need to? There's a citation piece here, but we don't need to read that tonight. Is that correct, Ms. Morton, on the recommendations?
If we could make that amendment this evening, Your Worship, and then give third reading as amended, that would be great.
Okay, so the first motion was that citation for bylaw 4818 be amended to read zoning bylaw 3531 1986, etc. Amendment bylaw 4818. Is that correct? Okay, so we can have that motion to amend first. Yeah. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. And then we have third reading.
Third reading.
Moved and is there a seconder? Seconded. Thank you. Any other discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I really want to commend our staff for working, and the owners. I want to commend them for working together in trying to resolve some of the issues that were raised by the Heritage Commission. And speaking of the Commission, I realized for myself that it would have been better form to have referred this to them first before we made our decision on this application, and it's a lesson that I've learned. And so what I'm hoping is that on every single heritage application, it goes to the commission before it comes back to us for final decision. I think their input is critical, and we value the commission and value their input. But I also commend the owners and staff for working out a covenant that seems to have resolved some of the major issues, that specifically on setback. And I appreciate that very much. So while I will support third reading, and I just want to make it clear that I think it's extremely important that we remember that we have a very valuable commission, and that we need to continue making referrals to them on heritage matters generally. So procedurally, I think that's just a note for us to remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would reiterate Councillor Green's comments in regards to wishing that we'd sent this to the Commission first. However, I also agree that the applicants have worked very well with staff and have come up with some really great solutions around this. So, so it makes it a little bit easier to support, but I look forward to, in the future, us getting the opportunity to pass it along to Commission first, or to have Commission look at things like this first. But I think it's a very supportable in its the format that it's in right now. I think it's very supportable.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braithwaite. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
One last point. I just want to say that in a case like this, I think it's important that we also encourage owners to take the time and care that these owners have taken in trying to do the right thing with this property and preserve it. So I appreciate that as well. Thanks.
I have Councillor Nathan Patterson.
Well, that was really my point. I appreciate the comments made about process. That needs to be smooth sailing for applicants like this. And my comment really was that I think the community is really fortunate that the applicant has come forward and worked so well, and with staff assisting them to make their way through this application. It's not always easy when you don't do this for a living, but this is I walk past this street so much, and that's an iconic building. It would have been disastrous if that had gone into a development project. So we're very fortunate that that building has been retained in the community as it's a real classic for us. So thanks to staff and the applicant and the committees for all their input.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I certainly echo the comments that were made about the reviews by appropriate bodies prior to the applications. I would also like to add, though, that this application was presented to the Advisory Planning Commission, who recognized the owners wanting to protect the heritage designation, but knowing that the review of heritage should be by the Heritage Commission. But the Advisory Planning Commission also really appreciated the desire by the owners to do infill housing, which is another goal of the OCP, and recognized their desire both to try to attempt to protect the heritage house that they have looked after and provided good stewardship for so many years, and also that they will be the adjacent owners of the new development that is being planned for the infill lot. And so for the Advisory Planning Commission, certainly that the goal of the community to have diversity of infill housing was also very important. And so I certainly appreciated their discussion and their comments and the recommendation that we proceed with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Don't see any other pieces of this. I just want to make sure, Councillor Zelka, just for the interest of clarity for the record here, I know you said you weren't able to attend the public hearing, but I am going to just ask you to confirm that you did have a chance to read the report of the public hearing that was included in the agenda under 4.2 or under the agenda package, just because that's a requirement of us as we're doing post-public hearing pieces, that the council read those or be aware of those.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did. I can confirm I did read the minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. With that, we have a motion on the floor that to give this third reading. Not seeing any other hands, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much to the applicants. And we look forward to
reading for Heritage Designation Bylaw number 4819, 2022.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. We're not doing adoption of that either. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. That carries. Thank you very much. And thank you to Council for moving that through. And we're moving on to number 9.3, which is the zoning bylaw amendment 00042 for 2367 Estevan Avenue. Mr. Weber, I'll just again ask if there's anything, maybe provide a very brief overview of process, and we can come back to this table. Go ahead.
Certainly, and thank you. The district obeys in receipt of a zoning bylaw amendment application to permit a higher occupiable height for a pit building in the RS5 single-story designation that permitted for the property located at 2367 Estevan Avenue. Allowing the home to stay in the single-story designation with a higher occupable height would permit an additional 5% lot coverage for the property, allowing the construction of a proposed addition to the rear of the residence, as well as a new detached garage in the rear yard. Staff have proposed a site-specific text amendment to Schedule B of the zoning bylaw be made. Zoning bylaw number 3531/1986, amendment bylaw number 4817/2022, to permit the subject property to have higher occupable height while remaining in the single-story designation. Council amended the citation for the bylaw at the July 11th council meeting, as well as provided it 3 readings. And at tonight's meeting, staff recommend that council approve the subject bylaw amendment and give final reading and adoption, or give final adoption to bylaw number 4817. I'm available this evening, and the property owner, Jeannie Fuller, is in attendance as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. I'm just going to do these in the order they're here so we can manage it. Could you get a motion to receive? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Then we'll deal with the 2 motions in order and have discussion on those as they come forward. Go ahead. Moved and seconded. So this is that zoning bylaw amendment 2367 Estevan Avenue be approved. Are there any questions or discussion on this matter on the bylaw? I don't see any, so I will ready to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And then zoning amendment bylaw moved and second. This is 4817/2022. This is for adoption. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much, Ms. Fuller, for your patience as we go through this process, and good luck with your project.
Thank you so much.
And we move on now to item number 9.4, which is the bylaw number 4820. We've had first 3 readings of this at the last council meeting, so we're looking for a motion for adoption.
Move adoption.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. For those wondering why so quick, we've done a fairly thorough presentation and discussion at the last meeting where we had the first 3 readings. This pause is built into the Local Government Act to make sure that we have a chance for sober second thought before we adopt bylaw changes. Item number 9.5, same sort of process. Can I get a motion for adoption? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any other discussion on the adoption of bylaw 4821/2022? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. And 9.6 is bylaw number 4822, the remuneration bylaw for adoption. Is there a mover and a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any other discussion?
I just want to say I think this is a really important move for Oak Bay, and the remuneration change really opens up the possibility for a broader range of people who will choose to participate in municipal politics. I think it evens the playing field for people who have not got the kind of income that is needed to spend the amount of time at the council table. So I support the motion on the table.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ney. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. And I know when this first started, there was some trepidation about this recommendation and the process, but I'm very grateful to our CAO, Ms. Williams, for her due diligence bringing us to this place. And I've also had really positive feedback, surprisingly, from a number of citizens that are aware. They read an article in the Tyee and one in the Capital Daily that shows where Oak Bay sat, both regionally and provincially, and they were quite taken aback. So far there's been positive feedback on this move to lift the stipend to a reasonable level. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Any other discussion on the adoption? I don't see any. We had a good debate last time about what the appropriate level was, and we've settled here. I'm amenable to that. I do think it was very fortuitous. It was interesting. The lowest, essentially per capita remuneration rate in the province is on that one article. Currently, I think it's also notable that this council has not had any pay raise over the course of its term. So this is a vote tonight is for the next council. So certainly there's some bump up demanded when you go through multiple years without any increases. So thank you for that, and look forward to an improved process of adjudicating this in future. I don't see any other discussion. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you for that. We now move on to item section 10, the last item of scheduled business for this evening, but a significant one. We do have members of the public who wish to speak to this. I know we had one hand earlier. This is the chance to raise your hand again. But just procedurally here, what we're going to do is we're going to take questions on all parts of this. So we're just going to get an overview. Now is Ms. McDougall, I believe, is going to provide or Mr. Bull, okay, will provide the overview. This has certainly been at least 2.5, 3 years in the making here to get us to this point. So we're not new to this. There's a number of different parts to bring this to a whole in terms of the bylaws. And so what I'm going to do is just procedurally here. We'll get the overview. We'll take questions of staff on anything, and then we will then open up for public input. And following public input, we will come back for motions to move things procedurally through. I see we have a presentation being put forward by Ms. McDougall, or sorry, by Mr. Bull. So why don't we start there? Welcome, Mr. Bull. And for those who don't know, since he is here and in the room tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will start with a couple of words, and then Ms. McDougall will deliver the details of the presentation. This is very a significant change in regulation that the district is considering, and I wanted to say about what is being presented today. It's a very comprehensive set of bylaw changes, and I was really glad to see that was done that way when I was looking at this for the first time, of course, last week when I was new, because it means that this program is being set up not just in terms of land use, but also in terms of the practical implications on a range of other fronts. So it's very comprehensive that way. This is the first step to get the bylaws are now prepared, of course, and that would start the process to change the regulation. And then if this in a couple of months does result in adoption of the bylaws, then we'll follow up separately with some details around implementation. But today the milestone is that we can have a look and council can consider these bylaw changes. So I'll leave it at that and ask Ms. McDougall to give a more fulsome overview. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bull. Welcome, Ms. McDougall.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. So I have a few slides here this evening. Just want to make sure that you can see them up on the screen there.
We can. They're up here, and we can hear you loud and clear. So please continue.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. So yes, I'll just go through these slides to kind of help go through the proposed secondary suites bylaw amendments. Let's see. There we go. So recently council endorsed a set of 10 guiding attributes that established a policy framework for implementing regulatory changes to allow secondary suites in Oak Bay. The draft guiding attributes were premised on the approach that regulations for secondary suites in Oak Bay should be flexible and attainable, should encourage more diverse and affordable housing options in Oak Bay, should provide oversight and accountability, should be respectful of neighbors while maintaining community character, and should prioritize health and safety for homeowners and tenants. With this direction, staff have developed proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw, parking facilities bylaw, driveway access bylaw, building bylaw, land use procedures and fees bylaw, which are before you today for initial consideration. These bylaws would enable secondary suites in Oak Bay by permitting the use and introducing the operational authority for staff to issue permits and regulate suites. Oops. There we go. The bylaw review and drafting process was led using the 10 guiding attributes endorsed by council. The proposed bylaws you see before you today have been drafted in consultation with staff from all impacted departments, including planning, building, bylaw, engineering, and corporate services. The bylaws have also been reviewed by the district's legal advisors. I don't know what happened with the numbering there, but sorry about that. Some sort of last minute technical change. Generally, the proposed bylaw amendments relate directly to the 10 guiding attributes council has endorsed. Some housekeeping amendments are included, as well as other technical amendments. Details on the tracking, registration system, and operational considerations are not included today. This information will be brought forward to council for review at the time of final reading of the bylaws. So with that, let's go through each set of the proposed bylaw amendments at a high level here. So starting with the zoning bylaw, amendments to section 2 definitions would add a definition for secondary suite, expand definition of one family dwelling to include a secondary suite, and expand the definition of family to include one caregiver, as per discussion with council to date. Amendments to section 4, general regulations, would add wording that allows a suite to be connected to a principal dwelling unit by a non-habitable room, and would add general regulations that would apply to all secondary suites, including things such as owner occupancy, building code requirements, prohibiting boarding use from within a suite, and ensuring that only one suite is allowed within a one family dwelling. And this image here just kind of outlines essentially what you would see within the components within a principal building. So you see here an example where we have a principal dwelling unit, a boarding use, and a secondary suite, and the image just kind of helps explain how that would be kind of broken up and regulated in terms of those various components within that principal building. That image is also provided within the report for your information. So amendments to section 5 would add wording to prohibit the use of a residential dwelling unit for short-term accommodations. And amendments to section 6, zones, would add secondary suite as a permitted use within all RS zones, subject to the general regulations I just recently discussed about in section 4. So just a reference back to that clause that applies to all secondary suites. So moving on to the parking facilities bylaw, amendments to the parking facilities bylaw propose to introduce and update definitions, to limit the use of tandem parking in relation to secondary suites, to add a requirement for one additional parking space for a suite, while also delegating the authority to the Director of Building and Planning to grant minor parking variances for secondary suites on the condition that the property can meet all listed conditions stipulated in the bylaw. Next, the amendments to the driveway access bylaw would allow the Director of Engineering to issue a driveway access permit for an access greater than 3 meters in width, exclusively for the purpose of providing non-tandem parking for a secondary suite in the instance that a parking space needed to be provided or was being provided. Amendments to the land use procedure and fees bylaw are proposed to introduce an application fee for a minor variance at a reduced rate, and to clarify the public notification process for a minor variance being approved by the Director of Building and Planning in accordance with the Local Government Act. And then finally, amendments to the building and plumbing bylaw are proposed to operationalize the implementation of the secondary suites program by introducing references to secondary suites within the bylaw, to ensure relevant sections of the code are applicable for health and safety and updated with current legislation, to add a reference to alternative compliance methods, and to clarify the process on issuing occupancy permits and inspection reports. So for brand new suites versus suites within existing structures, and to clarify enforcement options with respect to occupancy and change of use. Overall, the proposed bylaw amendments align with the OCP vision statement by helping provide a vibrant and safe community, enhancing community characteristics, thinking about how we're going to meet the current future needs building resilience and sustainability, diversifying our housing options and helping support a diverse population. And I think also by having residents provide an active contribution on local decision making, which is emblematic of the process that we've gone through to get to where we are today. So in terms of next steps, the following high-level outline is proposed. So over the summer, mostly in August, staff will look at refining those operational and cost considerations. Specifically, now that we have our new director in the department, we can talk a bit more about resourcing discussions, details on the tracking system. Those types of things will come forward with the staff report in September. So that's what we'll be working on probably for the majority of the remainder of this month and next month. Then in early September, we'll look at, we're proposing to host a public hearing for the zoning amendment bylaws. Notification for the public hearing will follow the Local Government Act requirements. September 26th, then we would be hopefully proceeding with final consideration of the proposed bylaw amendments, of course, obviously subject to your discretion as council. And then assuming all that went forward, we would look at website updates, public information packages, resources and staff changes further explored in the fall and winter of 2022, and full program implementation by early 2023. So 3 options are before council for consideration, including proceeding with initial reading of the bylaws as proposed, referring the proposed bylaws back to staff for additional information or clarification, or providing alternative direction. So that's the quick high-level overview of everything. There's a lot more details in the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I believe Dan Wong is also here. He's happy to answer any questions, and Andre as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDougall. I think a lot more details in the report is an understatement, as 120 some odd pages of details in that report. Very much appreciated in the way it was laid out as well. I believe there are some questions from council, so go ahead, Councillor Ney first.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much, through you, Mayor, to Ms. McDougall for and providing us now with narrowing things down and getting more clarity about this program. It's been a very constructive process, and thank you for your leadership on that. One of the with the current presentation of features of the bylaw, I like what's been developed here. One of the ones I'm really still struggling with is the on-site parking. And so I have some questions just around the ability of residents to apply for a development, a DPV, if I may just ask that. So one of the questions has to do with the way that residents will be approved to be able to apply for the DVP. As I understand it, they have to, from reading the documents, they need to be 400 meters from a bus stop. And I think it's in one of the appendices there. You've got some circles showing all the residents who would be included in those, in the circumference of that 400 meters from the bus stop. So my question is, there were some places that were excluded, not many, but some, and it may have been in the report, but I didn't see it. But how many residents in Oak Bay would be precluded from applying for a DVP? Were they wanting not to put a parking stall on their property, given the way this is laid out at this point?
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Just for the clarification of members of council, there were 3 conditions on page 117 of 124 within the bylaw. That's the section. So if you want to have a look at those 3 conditions, one of those conditions that we can consider tonight is that distance. I'm going to propose something that we just simplify this and get rid of B and C entirely and just leave it in the hands of the owner to put in a bike parking and make this much less complicated. But it's a good question to ask in terms of do we know how many, if that item number B is kept, do we have a sense of how many would not qualify for that in the district? Ms. McDougall?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, we don't have an exact number of parcels just because of how we got the data from BC Transit. It was hard to translate into our own system. But that being said, I think if you look at it, it would probably be safe to say that it probably applies to about 95% would be our estimate. And I think we, in our map, we identified that there's about 5,666 properties. So I could do the math quickly for you if you like, but it's just a rough estimate, unfortunately. Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Councillor Ney, anything else?
What was the number? Sorry, I missed that.
I think she said about 5% may approximately. So I'm going to count that. It'd be 250 homes if that's there to 300 homes approximately. But that's a very, very, very rough number.
I'm going to hold off on the next question. I'll just let other councillors speak to this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. I have Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. You can hear me okay?
Can.
Very good. I want to thank Councillor Ney for bringing up this exact topic, because it's exactly the same section of the parking facilities bylaw that I'm interested in. I'm just wondering, in terms of condition C, as far as providing the opinion of the director, that parking variance does not adversely impact the neighborhood. I'm kind of wondering what the interplay is then with the development variance permit. Is the development variance permit to be issued, the notice to consider, is that going to continue to be issued to the public? And then if folks on the street have issues with the amount of parking being provided, or being concerned about parking, is that going to be taken into consideration under the opinion of the director? Because I think I would have some reservations about that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Appleton. Ms. McDougall, if item C under conditions is maintained, is there a notification process that happens like it is with other variances, or is this handled more at the staff level?
No, so thank you for the question. And no, so in accordance with the Local Government Act, when a variance is delegated to staff, the notification process does not go out through the standard public process.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So maybe I can just ask, this seems to call, or on the face of it, it calls for the director to form an opinion on something as far as adversely impacting the neighborhood. I was just wondering whether the director might be able to comment on what might factor into that decision making and how such an opinion would be formed.
Mr. Bull, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Yeah, that is requires some careful consideration, of course, and I would need to think about, as staff, we need to think about what kind of criteria we would use. We'd like criteria to base these decisions on, but as it stands now, the policy would leave that a little bit open. So what comes to mind to me first is are there known parking pressures in those streets? Those would be things to look at. But of course, that is very much in the eye of the beholder, how much pressure there is or not. So that's probably the toughest one of the three. The other ones are a bit more clear. But number 3 would require us some carefully looking at the street and try to make that judgment call. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that's useful information. I guess then I would ask sort of the overall question of, is the delivery of this schedule to the bylaw contingent on the availability of condition C? If condition C were completely struck from the bylaw, could the goal still be achieved?
Ms. McDougall?
I think if I understand the question correctly, so you're maybe just to clarify, you're asking that if we were to remove that final condition, would we still be able to go out and take that into consideration as part of the delegated variance process?
I'm thinking, Your Worship, through you to staff, I'm thinking whether or not condition C is necessary to deliver the intent of the bylaw, not necessarily that staff could could make such a consideration in the absence of that, but just overall, is condition C necessary for the effective delivery of this bylaw?
Ms. McDougall, I think the question is there, can we simplify this and not without that and have it still be a functioning bylaw?
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, we could definitely remove it and it would still be a functioning bylaw. I think the one thing to note is that it wouldn't necessarily capture situations where we have, for example, a narrow heritage road that doesn't have any public parking on it, or a street with completely restricted parking access. So that was kind of the intent of bringing that in, is that it allows a little bit more nuances in situations where there is absolutely no on-street parking available.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. No further questions. Any other questions from members of council around the table? I'm just going to go to first-time questions first, and then I'll just go to pieces. But go ahead, Councillor Ney, and I have a question or two as well. But go ahead, Councillor Ney.
Through you, Mayor, to staff, could you explain how onerous would a DVP process be for a resident? Like, there was a bit of explanation. I'm just wondering if you could provide a bit more detail around, the cost, the time, the paperwork that would be required to make that application were at the will of a homeowner.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Go ahead, Ms. McDougall. I think it depends a little bit on what's included in these conditions. So perhaps you can just talk a little bit. We don't have, for those watching, we don't have a delegated variance bylaw yet in this municipality. So I think this is helpful for us to understand what that changes in our process. So thanks for the question, Councillor Ney. Ms. McDougall?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I think I'd like to raise two things in response to that. So one, we don't have a process right now, so we would be creating it a little bit, but there would be some standard aspects. So, we'd have an application form with the proposes to the land use procedure bylaw as they're before you today. We would have a $500 application fee. That's half of what the standard variance application fee is. We thought that was fair to reflect time saved by staff not having to support a public notification process and write reports to council. So the fee would be reduced. The process would require probably a simple form application. There would not be a staff report. We would probably make some notes, put it on file, and operationalize it that way. But some of these things would be subject to further discussion in the coming month with the new director.
Would they need to hire professional staff to do drawings or something like that, or is it more considered to be more simple than that?
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Ms. McDougall?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we've definitely designed this to be as barrier-free as possible. We would not want to be imposing additional instances of having to require technical staff. So the conditions outlined, all three of them should not require any additional professionals to support that.
One more, Mr. Mayor. Like, how long would you imagine that? We haven't got a process, but would it be weeks, months, years? No. Okay. How, approximately.
Ms. McDougall?
I mean, it's a bit speculative. We'll need to have that discussion in the coming month as we talk through those operational considerations and how we want to resource that and bring that information back to council in September. I guess my gut feeling on this one is that we would want it to be a fairly seamless process and to try to resource it to move as quickly as possible. But I don't have a specific answer. Maybe the director can add to that.
Sure. Mr. Bull?
Thanks, Mayor. Through you. Yes, I think maybe the key thing to note here, you are familiar with development variance permits that come to council, and that's typically well, it's hard to say timelines because I haven't been here too long, but several months in process just to get it reviewed, vetted, and to you to consider a notification process. This is a very different process because it's delegated. It does not come in notification. So the way this is set up, this allows us staff to combine it in the review of the other, basically the application, building permit application probably for the secondary suite, and roll it right into there. So it's very efficient. It's much shorter because we're literally looking at those 3 criteria. So we're going to ask the applicant, so do you have a plan for this electrical bicycle or scooter spot? And we know where the bus stops are. We might need to form an opinion on the street parking, but that can easily be rolled into the review process for the building permit that is taking place anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. And I presume this would need to be completed before the occupancy permit was issued. Would that be true? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do a quick follow-on question to that, just so I have some clarification on this. My read of this is the simpler and clearer the conditions are, the simpler that process is with the variance process. Is that a fair comment? Mr. Bull, I can't do nods because people can't hear you at home.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that would be correct. Things that we can easily look up on a map or in a table, those are preferable. That's also the type of things that the building officials are looking at for the secondary suite building permit. Anything that's a bit more complex takes a bit more time. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, and through you, Mayor, thank you very much, Ms. McDougall. It really has been a great report. This is a very important step for this community, actually. I just have a question follow-up to your comment. Did you say the application fee for this particular variance was $500 per application? Thank you.
Ms. McDougall?
Yes, thank you. So that's correct. As proposed in front of you today, the land use procedures and fees bylaw would be amended to include a $500 fee, which is reduced from the standard $1,000 fee. We can certainly change this depending on what council sees, but we just thought that that would be a practical starting point given that it's a 50% reduction in a standard variance application.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you so much for this very extensive report and all these proposed amendments to the various bylaws. It's very well laid out, and I very much appreciate my appreciation to staff. I appreciate with respect to the items on discussion around the development variance permit and for the parking spot. I know we put the principle forward that we would like to have a DVP process. I have no problems with the 3 criteria, and I appreciate the staff has already done some extensive mapping work to find out where the few areas where there already are some parking issues where most likely an on-site DVP, an on-site spot might be available should this go forward. And I presume as this process matures, that map would be updated to reflect more current conditions as we move forward with respect to the changing parking requirements throughout the district, as we densify ideally through this process and maybe through the infill. So I'd be in favor of keeping all 3 conditions, even if they are simplified. I did want to ask, however, with respect to the DVP process, is it possible that we could do a 75% reduction on fee for this? I mean, the reason I ask that is that the homeowner is already spending most likely up to $100,000 to add a second kitchen, going through a building permit process, putting in the proper firewall processes, tied in fire alarm conditions. There's a fair bit of work that will have to be done to the principal building, and a fair bit of paperwork that will already have to be done. But I certainly would not want this one permit at $500 to be a barrier. So just wanted to ask, if we choose, could we reduce that fee for this one permit to 75% of the standard?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Ms. McDougall, are there constraints on the fees set at this table?
Nope, there are no constraints. We could set it at council's discretion.
Thank you for that answer. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka. Anything else? You're muted again, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much. At an appropriate time, I'll be proposing that aspect, the 75% reduction of the standard fee, and when we get to amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I have any more questions? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And as a follow-up to what Councillor Zelka just raised, I certainly appreciate the comments from Councillor Zelka. But I guess my question to staff would be, for the secondary suites program, will there be a plan to capture information of staffing time that really is required to appropriately implement a secondary suites program in the work that is involved, so that there will be, I don't know, perhaps after a year or 18 months, there would be a further report to council to reassess any requirements for staff time or expenditures that are needed for managing the program, or to adjust the fees accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. That would definitely be worthwhile to monitor and have a look at, because with these kind of programs, on the one hand, we want to create a program that's accessible to applicants and make this easy to do the right thing. On the other hand, we also need to consider cost recovery of our services. And right now, 500, 250, 750, it's a bit hard to gauge what exactly would be cost recovery. We'll probably have to find it out and experience it. It will also be different between sites. So in short, it's something we're going to look at as part of the implementation report that will come back later this year. But definitely as staff, we would be keen to keep an eye on this to see if this is, to what extent is this a cost recovered program down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask, without it going to motions, that report that comes back, can we just ask that it includes just some options for a review process? So maybe in 2 years that some program review is undertaken, so that it comes back, and just so that forms part of the overall report that comes back, so we can consider that as a council at that time, and staff can put a bit of thought into it. Mr. Bull?
Mr. Mayor, yes, for sure, that we'll include that in the report as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Are there other questions of staff? No, I don't see many hands popping up, so I just have a couple quick questions. Under Ms. McDougall, I guess, under bylaw 4827, there's just a couple under 18.4 and 18.5. There's just some discussion there about an application for building permits made under the bylaw, and just restricting occupation until the owner's in receipt of a final inspection. And I guess perhaps instead of not going into the wording of this, at first blush I read it and it seemed like we were being very restrictive of not allowing sort of time frames for for people to bring things up to code and not recognizing existing suites. And I just want to maybe can you just confirm for this body in the wording of the bylaws here that there's mechanisms in place for existing suites that are going to be coming up to code, that there's some sort of mechanism of time allowance that would allow them that grace period or mechanism to move to code compliance. Ms. McDougall?
Thanks. Yeah, perhaps if you're all right, I'm going to refer this to Mr. Wong here, just as he was kind of the primary lead on the bylaw amendment section of this. So I can certainly follow up in addition to that.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Welcome, Mr. Wong. This is the first time we've spoken to you tonight.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of the council. I believe your question is in reference to mechanisms for time allowances with respect to bringing things up to code. And as council in our many discussions have suggested that you wanted to provide an opportunity for people to bring their suites up to code, and so this does allow for that. So this isn't a the district going out and actively seeking out compliance. This is for voluntary compliance for people coming to the district seeking to bring their suites up to code. And so I believe there is some leeway, as you suggest, Your Worship, with respect to giving some time and allowances. I think we had talked, about a year or 2 years to provide some of that allowance to happen. So.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's reassuring. And the other question I have here is just circling back to the question of the parking, because I think that was the one area that we had some disagreement on council on, and I think we want to seek, even those who sought the inclusion of parking, we're also seeking a mechanism to make it fairly straightforward for people. I guess, and I read through it, it seems to me that simpler is better and cheaper is better for those variances, so long as they don't actually cost us money, as long as it does cost recovery. So Ms. McDougall, this is really a question for you. Is there any issue with making that portion of the variance, as simple as possible? And I'm looking at, is there any reason not to just include just A, so that the power to have a variance is entirely in their thing? They just need to have a secure bike lockup, and if they do that, they get the variance with a reduced fee attached to that. Is there any concern from staff if we were to make it that much simpler, cheaper, and easier to get that variance?
I think from a technical legislative perspective, there's no concerns. The legislation is just clear in that when you're creating a delegated variance permit, you need to be including conditions in the bylaw about what will allow for that variance to be issued. So as long as there is at least a condition, I think that would satisfy the Local Government Act. So in that regards, yes, we could certainly change that. I think from a thinking about what's happening on the ground, it might be good to include something with regards to on-street parking as well, but that's up to council. So happy to support in whatever way you see fit.
And just for my clarification, when you say you refer something to on-street parking, that would be item C on that list, that would give the director the authority to consider the impact on neighbors, etc. Is that why that piece is in there then?
Exactly, yes. Thank you, Your Worship. To essentially address situations where there would not be any on-street parking available, that would be why that C would be included.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. That helps. I don't see other hands in terms of questions. So procedurally here, I'm going to go to the public. Sorry. I'll just go procedurally, then I'll go to you, Councillor Ney. So I'll go to the public, and after I get one more question in here from council, and then we'll go to the public for any comments or questions, and then we'll come back to this table and we'll start looking at. I think we'll deal with the items somewhat holistically. If there's anything that you think has one bylaw change that might affect another bylaw portion, then we should talk about that as a whole. And then other than that, we'll walk through these pieces and consider the motions in order. So go ahead, Councillor Ney, with your question, and then I'll go to the public.
Yeah, just I probably overlooked it here, but what if we got in place for a requirement for a tenant outdoor space for a secondary suite? Could you define what the proposal is at this point?
Sure, I think it's silent on this at this point, if I recall. Ms. McDougall, is there any wording on tenant outdoor space?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. No, that's not something that we have put forward at this point. That didn't seem to come up specifically in relation to the 10 attributes for key policy considerations. Certainly something that we could look into as well in future. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of a clear alignment within the zoning bylaw, but that's not to say that it wouldn't be possible. It's just to say that it's not something that's come up to date.
I had the COVID at our last meeting, so I didn't have the input at that meeting, but personally, I think that's a really important feature of a good secondary suite program. And my reason, can I speak to that, Mr. Mayor? Or it is related to the question, but yeah, I don't. Okay, so
you can make a brief comment. I'm just trying to keep us on instructions so we get to the public in a reasonably timely fashion. But go ahead. I think you've raised this point before.
Yeah, that's right. So I know that's how Victoria has it, and to think that a person who's a tenant of a property can only reside within the indoors and not have any outdoor space seems unreasonable to me, and I personally would like to see some provision for that. But I have a second question, if I may, Mr. Mayor, before we get to the public. With regards to time to get into compliance, I'm just wondering, there's talk right now about 1 or 2 years. We haven't pinned that down right now, but this would be a difficult number to project, but I have a little bit of concerns about timeframes around for getting into compliance. Thinking about a circumstance where a resident wasn't able to because it was too expensive and onerous. And I don't know how many people that would be in our community. So those are for existing suites not in compliant of building code. I'm not talking about health and safety. I'm talking about building code issues. And I'm just wondering if we're able to make any estimate about how many of those suites would be in. I guess my concern, and I don't have any evidence to support how pervasive this issue would be in our community, is that people couldn't come into compliance. We'd lose those suites. And so we're losing precious housing stock at this time, and I'm just wondering if staff has any advice about how to get a handle on what that number might be and to make an informed decision around timelines for compliance around building code for existing secondary suites.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. That's a big question. Council has given, just for clarity to the public, given direction that all suites will have to comply with A or B of the code. We have not specified that time frame yet. Ms. McDougall, do you have? I know we don't know exact numbers, but do you have any answers to Councillor Ney?
If it's okay, I might refer to the director on this one. I think this is a bigger picture question that I might not be suited to answer.
Well, I might go to Mr. Wong as well in terms of the question of the, in terms of the numbers. Mr. Wong, perhaps you can remind us, I know we only have estimates as to how many suites may exist actively in Oak Bay at any given time, but you can maybe share that information with us and then talk a little bit about the potential timeframes required to allow people to come to code.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you and through our discussions and some work with BC Assessment and other research, we've estimated somewhere between about 500 to 700 existing secondary suites within Oak Bay. Again, really difficult to determine how many of those could comply with Division A of the code, which has been relaxed, I would say, for primarily for health and safety purposes. But we are dealing with some older homes within Oak Bay. There are some ceiling height considerations, although Division A does talk about reducing some of those ceiling heights. So yeah, really difficult to pin down exactly how many of those 500 to 700 homes may possibly would not be able to meet the building code, but certainly that's where this program over the next couple of years will seek to clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Councillor Ney, anything else? Okay, we still have questions in the room. I do want to get to the public just so we can complete that and come back to this table, but go ahead, Councillor Patterson, you had another question. We can continue questions after as well, but go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Just for clarification on this, and as a follow-up to some of the questions that just preceded this, for tenants who wish to understand whether they are in a suite that is actually compliant, is there certification that, or some form of registration that if a tenant wanted to know if a suite was registered and it did comply, that they could obtain that information?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. That information probably coming back in the fall. I know I've had discussions with staff already about setting up a website where the people who have applied and it's pending and it's completed would be there, so tenants would be aware. So it'd be sort of a commonplace, but I think the recommendations from staff will be coming back in the fall. But Mr. Bull, anything you wish to add to that?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I appreciate the comment. That's something that staff are also looking into. Because this program is, of course, meant for owners to take action, but what about the tenants themselves? Can we give them information and also give them some information about their own living quarters. So definitely very interested to see how that could be incorporated in our implementation program. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Thank you, Mr. Bull. Go ahead, Councillor Green, another question, and then we'll get to, I feel bad here, but go ahead, Councillor Green.
No, thank you very much, Mayor. Councillor Patterson's question actually raised another question for me, and that is tenants' insurance. So normally in rental units, tenants are able to purchase tenants' insurance packages. Will that be possible if in a suite, a suite that isn't necessarily registered or certified, that would not be possible. But I'm just wondering if that's a question for tenants as well. Can they get insurance coverage for their contents?
Councillor Green, I don't think that's an answer we have to have at this table right now. I'm just, as I go to the public here for comments and questions, I just remind, just procedurally here in the context of what we're going to contemplate, we have obviously a very detailed and interrelated suite of changes to their various bylaws. There are things in here that we can change tonight and make those changes. There are some that probably would require us to send it back and have come back in the fall for first and second reading. That would obviously delay the process. So I think you want to just think about these things. What can we include in our changes tonight? What we may want to get additional information in the implementation and things that might be subject to a review as we go forward. I'm going to go to the public now. Ms. Smart, you've been very patient with your hand raised. If you want to unmute yourself, you can just give your name, municipality of residence, and then you're free to address council on the myriad of bylaw changes that we're considering here tonight for first and second reading, and of course we will have a chance for a public hearing in the fall as well. Welcome, Ms. Smart.
Thank you, Mayor Murdoch. I appreciate your framing of that very much. I'm Carrie Smart. I'm a local architect, and I live 2144 Quimper Street in South Oak Bay. I work a lot with delegated development permits, and I have a strong recommendation with regards to the third condition on the delegated development permit. I, of course, would love to see council take the leadership of not even having this delegated development permit, but I also don't want to do anything to further delay the implementation of these secondary suites, because I feel like the timeline is the most important. In working with delegated development permits, I can just say that if anything is not sort of black and white, as opposed to whether or not it complies, it leads to a lot of staff time. And what often ends up happening is that the public really gets, the staff get in the middle of the public complaining and the person applying, and it leads to a lot of wasted time. And I see a lot of projects going to council over this, and we already have such tight staff resources. So I would love to see point 3 removed. I would also love to see the leadership of no fees for this approach. And if anybody should be having fees for this, it really should be the people that are going to be putting parking spots on their property, putting more permeable paving and taking up their gardens. In the light of climate change, we need to be taking the leadership of the approaches that we're looking at with the local Cool Kit project. So I would suggest removing number 3, ideally having no fees for those that are actually taking the green approach in developing their secondary suites. And I just want to point out the irony to widening a driveway usually takes away a parking spot. So the whole concept of having an extra car on a property in a wider driveway often doesn't produce any more actual parking and paves over nature. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Smart. Before you leave, can I just get clarification? You did refer to that as delegated development permit, and we're talking about a delegated variance process. Your comments still stand under the variance process?
It does, still stand under the variance process, yes. And I did actually, have one more point just with regards to A, that we really definitely need to clarify whether or not that space for the bicycle or scooter can be located inside of a suite, and whether or not it can be a simple electrical outlet, because those things are not clear right now in the conditions.
Thank you for that, Ms. Smart. And I'm going to turn that into a question for staff. I think this is left general for that purpose. It could be indoor, outdoor, and electrical facility. I think could be as simple as a plug. But Ms. McDougall, in drafting those conditions, perhaps you could just clarify what the staff understanding of that wording is for, a secure parking spot with electrical facility.
Yeah, so I don't, we didn't restrict it to being included within the suite because it could be that the parking is provided for the tenant and the electric bicycle parking or electric scooter parking is provided for the principal owner or vice versa. So we didn't add more specific wording in there to leave it more open and flexible. And then in terms of specific connections, we just didn't go into that level of detail because, again, we thought we would want to provide flexibility for the homeowner.
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. McDougall. And thank you, Ms. Smart, for joining us this evening. I'm going to come back to, I don't see other hands raised within the app, so I'll make another call if there's any members of the public that wish to address us. You're more than welcome to do so. You will, of course, if we attend to this timeline, we will have the day of September 8th, of course, for in-depth public hearing for input on the changes as well. So certainly that is another opportunity for the public to address us. This is at this point. Are we comfortable with the pieces going forward to public hearing for public comment? Okay, not seeing other members of the public who wish to address council on this matter, I am going to come back to this table. So I think this is a bit of as we talked about many times, the sum of the parts, not just the individual pieces, and obviously that's what we have in front of us. I certainly have heard from this body, I think, general agreement to move these things forward, with the exceptions of possibly simplifying the process and cost of the delegated variance piece. So I think we can deal with that as we get to the parking facilities bylaw amendments portion. We can make those amendment changes if there's any that are desired as part of second reading. But I just want to make sure that those things don't impact other pieces as well as we go. So let's just talk to the whole, and then we can, if there's nothing else that are more specific, then we'll come back to we can start walking through the bylaws. Councillor Ney, you have your hand up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if I could get some advice as we walk through this, perhaps from staff. Generally I'm supportive of the key pieces of this, a little bit of tweaking. But I'm not at all supportive of the requirement for on-site parking. I just feel really strongly about that, and because we're breaking this up, I just was wondering if I could get some advice about which bylaw I would be voting against, because I'm not going to support any aspect of the bylaw, and I don't know what. So if I could get some, I presume it's the parking facilities bylaw, but I'd just like to get some advice on that.
Sure, I believe that is correct, Councillor Ney, but Ms. McDougall, can you just confirm it is the bylaw 4823? That would be the point that we would have any changes would be made, and if a councillor wishes to vote against a portion of this, that would be the portion that they would do it.
Yes, I suppose if a councillor wanted to vote against the requirements for on-street parking, then also, so beyond the parking facilities bylaw that you've identified, I guess the driveway access bylaw relates to that, as well as the land use procedures and fees bylaw. All of those things tie into parking for suites and the delegated authority for staff to issue variances, which are all connected.
Okay, thank you. Did I say for off-street parking or on-street parking? I meant to say I do not agree with off-street parking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Ney. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to start with a question, if I may, through you. Just one more question that's sort of come up with hearing my colleagues speaking. On page 1114 of the 124-page staff report, it talks about various changes, amendments to the zoning bylaw in particular. Zoning bylaw 3531. I wanted to ask in particular about number 7. Starts on page 113, goes to page 114. And it has to do with the changes to section 511. Prohibitions related to prohibiting for short-term accommodations. When I look at section 511.19 in the existing zoning bylaw, I see that there's an A, B, and a C already there, and I presume that the suggested changes here would be adding a D, a fourth condition, but that's not clear in terms of what's being laid out here on page 1114.
Sure, I'll give that question to Ms. McDougall to answer. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And if Ms. McDougall, if you want to give it to Mr. Wong, you're welcome to do so. Bylaw 4825, section 5, subsection 1, subsection 1, number 19.
Yes, so I'm sorry, I think I'm a little bit confused on the question being asked. The amendments written there would add section 5.1.1 in brackets 19, which would go right under 5.1.1 brackets 18 aquaculture.
And I apologize if I may. There already is a 51119, which prohibits the use of land or building for the resale sale of cannabis or cannabis consumption lounge. So 19 already exists. So I just wanted to know whether this was going to be a fourth condition added to the existing 19, or if this was maybe possibly a misnumbering.
Sorry, thank you, and through you, Your Worship, yes, that is a misnumbering. I must have been looking at a consolidated zoning bylaw that did not include
Excellent.
5.1.1. Yeah, so that would just need to be cleared and changed.
Appreciated that. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So procedurally here, we can move these bylaws, and then we're doing. This is 4825. I'm just going to go to my procedures here. So this is something that we're considering for first and second readings. So we can we can do first and second readings as is, and just have the amendment either done now if we can get that correction in place, or we can have it come back with the corrections in terms of the numbering when it comes back in the fall with those corrections made. Councillor Zelka, just I think procedurally.
Yeah, thank you so much. And coming back in the fall is fine for me. It was unclear for me, but now it makes sense. Thank you.
No problem. And we certainly have a fair number of variations of our bylaws floating around. And I know if you Google search it, it comes up with an older version. And if you do an internal search, it comes up with a newer version. And it's all very confusing. But Ms. Morton, you had something to add?
Yes, just briefly, Your Worship. Thank you. If we could do that amendment this evening, actually, that would be great.
I will just make a note of it then. So what was the amendment changing 5.1.119? What would that change to?
I presume changing it to 51120.
I'm just going to confirm with staff that that is correct in terms of looking at their copy of the bylaw. Go ahead, Ms. Morton.
Yes, that is correct, Your Worship.
Okay. I will make note of that when we get to the motions, that we can make that change at this time. So thank you.
And if I may, while I still have the floor.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Would this be an appropriate time to put forward a potential change in the reduced fee from 50% to 75%? Of course, I'm assuming that we will be monitoring this, in a year or two's time, as discussed. But as a starting position, that's something I would like to have considered. I don't know where that.
The answer is no, Councillor Zelka. What I'm going to do is I have that as a note under bylaw number 4824, and after we do first and second reading, we'll take amendments, and you can make that motion to change it from 500, where that is listed, and move it to $250, which would be the 75% reduction. So I'll deal with that when we get to that item on the in that series. But I think it's worthwhile noting that you intend to do that at this point. So thank you. Go ahead, Councillor. Anything else, Councillor Zelka?
No, that's all for now. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ney.
with regards to my comment about outdoor, a requirement for outdoor space for tenants, does that require a motion for consideration to the to council at this stage, or what happens with that?
So one of the issues I think we face here is that we're beyond the kind of the abstract and into the bylaw changes phase of this. So I think we're in a little bit of a risky situation of making bylaw changes on the fly here for that inclusion. We may want to just, as a motion arising at the end of this, ask staff to, as this comes back in the fall, ask if there's a mechanism by which we can add it as an amendment in the after second reading in the fall after the public hearing for inclusion. That's probably procedurally the best way, unless you have a prepared piece ready to go. It's just without having a legal review of the bylaw changes. I think that's quite difficult to make that change. Yeah, it's but I think that's where we're at right now. We're in the stages of implementation at this point, so the big question pieces are a little difficult to incorporate at this moment. Any other discussion or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, Mayor, I'd just like to start with the easy part of this and make a motion that we receive the report.
That is the easiest part of this tonight, so I will take that. Motion to receive has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Before I call the question, actually, I'm just going to make sure I have one last chance for any of the members of the public who wish to address council. I don't. So I'm getting head shakes from the audience or from the staff, and see nothing on my screen, so that's fine. We'll deal now back to this table for the balance of the evening, dealing with this procedurally. A motion to receive is on the floor. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. So procedurally here, I'm going to ask that we tackle these as they are, and then we'll take motions to amend. So I just would like to, we can move first and second reading as amended to change the notion of 5.1.1 subsection 19 to 5.1.1 section 20. Is that adequate if we move first and second reading as amended, Ms. Morden, or would you rather it moved as is and then have a motion to amend?
Thanks, Your Worship. If we could actually have a motion to amend to start with, and then we can give first and second reading.
So moved.
So motion to amend that change from, so again, just for clarity, 5.1.1.19 is changing to 5.1.1.20. That motion to amend is now on the floor. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. So we will look for first and second reading together of that amended bylaw.
First and second reading of 4825.
2022. Perfect.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any changes or any other any motions arising for amendment on this bylaw in front of us? I see none, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Then we just need a public hearing motion.
I'll move that the public hearing be scheduled for secondary suite zoning bylaw amendment number 4825/2022 on Thursday, September 8th, 2022 at 6 p.m. at Municipal Hall, to be held in person and with electronic participation available.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Definitely look forward to that input. And then we're getting into the meat of the pieces. So for those who are watching this and understanding the process, the zoning bylaw amendments require a public hearing. So those portions of this are going forward for public hearing. Those are the pieces that are going to be really seeking input on. However, because this is a complicated change, it touches on a number of other bylaws that you've heard them discussed here tonight. And so we're looking now procedurally, we can move first, second, and third reading of these, and should the balance of that, after public hearing, if it has third reading and adoption, then we would look to adopt these other portions as well to make the all the parts work together. So that's the process that we're undertaking here. Now we have next up the parking facilities bylaw amendment piece here, and if someone wants to read that,
I'll
we can deal with
move
it.
the secondary suites parking facilities bylaw amendment number 4823/2022 be given first and second
reading.
readings.
Yes, thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Now, this is the one that I flagged because I've heard a number of comments made both from the public and from members of the council. We've certainly debated the merits of having a parking spot required. I think we've now had that at the discussion twice. If people want to re-raise that, we can do that. But I think if this is here, this is really comes down to the question tonight: is the conditions column and then later on the fees column. So if there, but I'll take any motions to amend as people see fit. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you. I am going to reiterate my comments from last meetings because I've listened to everything. I have the report now. And again, I'm very grateful for the report and Ms. McDougall's and Mr. Wong's excellent work. But I will not support bylaw 4823. This feels like, to me, another barrier. It is potentially punitive and is complex, involving fees and a process that could be onerous both for the homeowner and for the tenant. My concern is, and I can save my comments, but there's no point. I'm going to sort of speak to them as a group. In exacting fees for the applications, I'm concerned that that might be reflected in a higher rent, that the homeowner might be forced to raise the rent for the tenant to offset the cost of fees on applications. It also places what I consider an onerous burden on our staff related to intervention and enforcement, and is subject to interpretation, and it's very awkward, I think. I really don't feel that we should be requiring off-street parking. I think that what I would like to see, if we're serious about climate change, then we should be equally serious about protecting green space and tree canopies, and certainly in the context of the cool kit that we've already launched. And finally, I am looking for a culture of acceptance for secondary suites, the people who own them and the people who live in them. And I think the more barriers and restrictions we add, the less accepting the culture may be in the particular neighborhood. So those are my feelings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I have Councillor Appleton and then Councillor Ney.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I similarly, Council has heard my opinion on the provision of off-street parking. I don't feel it's necessary. I do feel, as has been stated here by Councillor Green, I feel it's a barrier to implementation of secondary suites. And I don't believe that it should be incumbent on anybody that wants to provide a secondary suite to go through a costly and potentially onerous process to get to approval. Quite simply, Council has heard me comment on this many times. We need to stop making decisions based on storage of private vehicles. It's just something that we should be planning on moving away from as a community in terms of achieving our sustainability goals. It just simply is not compatible with moving forward with a sustainable and active transportation oriented community. So I will not support this this requirement under this bylaw at this time. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ney. And go ahead.
Yeah, so for similar reasons, I have 3 reasons. One, a requirement for on-street parking for secondary suites is unfair. We don't ask that of residents who live in the non-secondary suite. If they have more than one car, that they have to provide extra parking spaces. They're able to use the street parking, which is an abundance apparently. So my second point is that it's unnecessary, because the staff report showed that 90% of the streets in Oak Bay do not have a parking place. So why are we we're designing a policy, a bylaw here to deal with the exception, not what is the norm here. And 3, this direction of using up green space to provide more parking space, which is like an incentive once people get into the resident, is really contrary to the trending of Clean BC and other climate action initiatives, where we know over the next 5, 6, 7 years vehicular traffic will be reduced significantly up to 30%. So we should be working towards policies that are incentivize reduction of car use, and I think requiring a space is going to incentivize residents who use the suite. So yeah, overall, I think too, if we want to increase our housing stock, this is just yet another unnecessary barrier that we're adding to the residents who may want to make the conversion.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I did hear some discussion around the table about the possibility of striking B and or C off that list. I think I'm not going to make the motion, but I would strongly support that. I think that just making it the very simple act of, if you can show that you've got a secure bicycle lockup, you get an automatic waiver from the parking spot, addresses 99% of the concerns that have been expressed by the last 3 speakers, and ensures that there's active transportation infrastructure at the site available to the tenants. And with just that small work, then you're waived automatically. And it seems to me that you're supporting active transportation and automatically waiving the need for the parking spot. This is an ability to do that. So I would hope that there be somebody willing to move. So that we can discuss it.
Just to be clear, Mr. Mayor, the proposal is that should a homeowner wanting to build a secondary suite provide a space for a bicycle, not necessarily electric, a bicycle and a locked space, they could be exempt from putting a parking space on the property. Is that the idea?
So currently under the proposal under condition A, there's 3 conditions. Condition A says if there's a lockable bike location with electric infrastructure, so a plug.
Oh, okay.
Then that condition alone would. So my suggestion, my feeling is that we could get rid of B and C. I hear the recommendation of staff that C does provide some wiggle room for staff.
Well, it gets rid of, yeah.
But it would just, I think, from a simplicity of explanation to the public, A alone would be the easiest, and then it's just very straightforward to people. Do this, you get approved, done. So I'm hoping that somebody here will move that.
Sorry,
we can debate
could I just ask one? Just to be really clear, so then if that were done, they wouldn't need to put a parking space?
That is correct.
Okay, well, I'll move that.
So is someone willing to move that we strike either B or C? Councillor Zelka?
If what's being moved is to strike B and C, I'd be willing to second that to test it.
I need someone to move it first.
Oh, I thought Councillor Ney did.
You did. Okay, so it was moved and seconded. So thank you. So that's live. If the move would allow me to motivate on that a little bit, I think I already have to a degree, but I see the as of right rules being in place makes sense to me, as long as we make it easy for people to just say, as long as they're doing the basics of providing active transportation infrastructure, much like we did at the new building where the Casey site is. We recognize that we can waive parking requirements where there is active transportation infrastructure provided. All the other aspects here are outside of the owner's control. If we leave it as just A with a very nominal fee, and I would support Councillor Zelka's suggestion of reducing that fee to a very nominal sum, then it's very straightforward to people. They are required to do it, but if they don't want to, all they have to do is demonstrate that they provided active transportation, secure lockup, and they get it waived. And I think that's a very reasonable approach to move it forward. I think it achieves, again, the vast majority of what we're trying to achieve. It recognizes that there isn't necessarily a need for cars, but it also makes sure that it forces within a reasonable, it doesn't force, but it strongly encourages landlords to provide the basics of infrastructure to support that kind of active transportation. So that's the motion on the floor, is just to strike B and C from this. And again, if it's not working sufficiently, if there's too many odd cases, I think we may have to bring back C in the future, but I think simplicity of message is valuable at this point. So I would be very strongly supportive of the motion on the floor. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you. Surprisingly, I think I'm going to support this. For me, this encompasses 2 things that are important. One is, at the very least, the support for active transportation at the least. But really, the secondary thing is this is the opportunity where staff has a chance to provide a pamphlet, provide a good neighbor policy, provide an opportunity to share the culture of Oak Bay, or at least the expectations embedded in the various bylaws, with this newcomer to Oak Bay potentially, to help us maintain the ambience and the livability that we have here. And so this is literally a customer touch point, and this is why I would appreciate the opportunity to have this development variance permit process, to make it relatively nominal in terms of a fee and relatively simple. I think is reasonable, but I think it must happen so that we can at least maintain the broad outline of our official community plan in terms of what we're trying to maintain here within Oak Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Ney, you had your hand up?
I guess, I mean, I think I put the motion forward, didn't I? So, I'm generally in support of it, but I have to say, I'm thinking, why can't we make the parking spot, the default, the bike hookup and the electrical output, and then so that they don't have to do the permit business. Make that's what the expectation that's tied to being able to get an occupancy permit for a secondary suite. And if somebody wants an extra parking space, that's the piece that they need to come forward to make the application for it, to make that more onerous. I throw that out just as, you know, an afterthought about this motion. I don't know if there's any discussion or comments by other councillors about that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ney. I don't certainly have the answer to that question. I don't know if big ask of Ms. McDougall to sort of rethink the approach taken here, but are there mechanisms by which we can, or maybe I'll ask Mr. Bowl, maybe I'll ask you that question, not so much within our current bylaw, but are there mechanisms where you're building a bylaw as of right, so anybody can build a secondary suite without having to ask permission, that we would have a touch point to say you also have to, in a I guess it could be does this form part of the building code or the zoning that all buildings then have to have lockable bikes? How might that work?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are more and more bylaws that also require, for example, things like bicycle parking or electrical charging for vehicles. So in that sense, traditionally, parking was always for cars in zoning bylaws, or in this case, a separate bylaw. I think there would be options to look at taking the other approach as Councillor Ney is suggesting. I don't think as staff we have the wording for that ready, or maybe it can be done. Let me see. We still have a bit of time. So if there is substantial change that Council agrees to for this particular bylaw, it would be best to maybe limit readings today to first and second, and then we can bring you an updated bylaw back if that's council direction. It also gives us a chance to vet with legal counsel to see where that sits and how we would do that exactly, if that's council's desire. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bull. I'll leave it to staff or to council to decide on that process. But Councillor Day, anything else you wish to add?
So the staff recommendation or suggestion, I guess, is whether we take this to first, second, and then defer it to staff for consideration of this idea.
I think the answer to your question was that it may be possible to do it a different way, but we would have to give that direction to go and do some research to change the bylaw.
So I mean, I would be open to that personally. So I'd ask for direction about how to amend what we've got on the table and move to that direction, whether there's council support for that.
Well, procedurally here, I might suggest, because I think we all have the shared goals here, so my personal suggestion on this one would be just if the will of the council is this, to support the amendment. If people don't feel like it's still supportable even with the amendment, that you can vote against it, but if it moves forward, then we can move first and second reading. There can be a motion arising at that point to refer this back to staff to ask if there's changes that could be made that would change that order or change the approach taken, and those options could be brought back. It may require, just for the record though, so some more substantive changes to some of the other bylaws as well, but that would just come back in any information. But I think procedurally here, the simplest is to deal with we have an amendment on the floor right now. Right now, it's just to strike B and C to simplify the test criteria. And then I think if this passes, then we deal, or it fails, we come back to the main motion and a first and second reading, and we could take another motion at that point, as you raised, Councillor Ney, to possibly consider that. But I think we have to deal with the merits of that once that motion is made. But procedurally, that's where we'd be at. So we have a motion to amend on the floor right now, which is just to strike B and C under the conditions. So I think just asking the people to vote on the merits of those changes, not on the main motion, which is still can be voted on when we get to that. Are there any other discussion on the motion on the floor to make those to strike B and C from those conditions? I do not see any, so I will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment, and any opposed to the amendment changes? Councillor Green opposed. That carries. So the motion, the bylaw is now amended, just with a much simpler conditions column of 1, which just requires the biking infrastructure. Now, Councillor Ney, you raised the possibility of so before you speak on that, I think we better get some guidance in terms of what that might look like. We probably still have to go through first and second reading if we're not going to interrupt the timelines here. And I'm not sure, and I think the ask has to be as clean as possible so that we're not going out and looking at a whole bunch of different options on this. Ms. Morden, you look like you were reaching for a button. I will let you answer or give some direction here. And for those wondering, Ms. Morden is our Deputy Director of Corporate Services, who helps us with our procedure when Mr. Coates is not here. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. And before I start out with this suggestion, I will say if the CAO disagrees with me, please feel free to jump in. I would actually suggest, because what's being contemplated touches a few different bylaws here, my suggestion would be, instead of giving first and second reading, that we actually have a referral back to staff. We would refer possibly all 3 bylaws back to staff for further exploration, and then bring them forward in September for you. So we're looking at having a meeting on September 19th, which is currently a committee of the whole, but having at least a portion of that be council meeting, and then having September 26th as well. So there would be the opportunity for that to come back and for there to be a conclusion of those bylaws.
Okay, so the simplest course of action here, because we are in a formal meeting with motions on the floor, etc., we should test this motion as amended, and if it fails, then that would the motion arising would be to then, I would think, suggest we send the balance of these back to staff for consideration with very specific instructions to make those changes. So right now we have the motion as it is on the floor. So this is a motion.
I wish to move an amendment.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much. I do note that this particular bylaw, the parking facilities bylaw, I think is that the correct term for it? Yeah, bylaw to require and regulate parking facilities. It contains in definitions the definition of boarding use in section 3, and the suggested changes here to the bylaw don't mention any deletions of section 3, and I just was wondering if maybe that was an oversight since we redefined boarding use elsewhere. It appears that it was missed here. That's one item. Number 2 is this slightly different than what Councillor Ney was mentioning earlier on. This bylaw also, if you have many, how do I say this? Many bedrooms in the house, say 6, 8, 10 bedrooms in your house because you have a very large family. I understand there are formulas within this bylaw which say you need to have more parking spaces as a result based on the number of bedrooms. So I just want to confirm, first of all, that piece, just to make sure that there's not a misunderstanding of the number of parking spaces that may be needed with respect to this bylaw.
Thank you,
through you
Councillor
to staff.
So you're referring to currently existing language in the bylaw
yes.
that's being left intact at this point.
Yes.
So can we just confirm that, Ms. Morden or Mr. I'm not sure if Mr. Wong looked at the non-changed portions of this.
I can speak to that.
Sure, welcome. Thank you. Welcome back, Ms. McDougall.
Yeah, so with regards to the boarding use question, no changes to the definition in the zoning bylaw are proposed, so therefore no changes to the definition in the parking facilities bylaw are changed. There's things tangentially being changed with regards to boarding use, but it's not actually the definition itself. So that's why that's not being addressed in the bylaw amendments.
And the second question was just under the current bylaw, there's a formula that basically says, I think up to 4 bedrooms, you have 2 parking spots as a whole. And as you go up, there's additional parking spots required. Those changes are not being, there's no changes to that formula being contemplated in these changes for the secondary suites. That still stays intact, independent of whether they're suites or it's a single family dwelling. Is that correct, Ms. McDougall?
Yes, exactly. That's correct.
That answer the questions, Councillor Zelka?
It certainly answers the second question. So if there is a house with 12 bedrooms in it, there will need to be more than 2 parking spaces according to the current formula. It's really the only point I'm trying to make. However, I do wish to ask a clarification about my first question. Right now, the existing wording in the parking facilities bylaw says that boarding use, the definition is no more than 2 other unrelated persons in the principal building, which I believe we're changing in the zoning bylaw. So I wonder out loud whether we either need to remove boarding use definition from here and refer it to whatever is going to be over in the zoning, or wherever we're redefining boarding use, since boarding will now be up to 5 unrelated people, or 6 if I remember correctly.
I think there may
So
be
I asked that question through you to staff.
I'll ask the staff the question. Just confirm that. There's a difference between the boarding question and the question of the number of unrelated people, because that's the total in the principal building or principal dwelling unit. But I think I'm going to just let staff have a chance to read through and make sure that the language is consistent between the zoning bylaw and the parking facilities bylaw.
And I do apologize if I may clarify. I am reading a copy of the existing bylaw that is available on the website today in the bylaws section. And boarding use does say that no more than 2 other unrelated persons in the principal building in the existing bylaw. Thank you.
Just going to go, probably this is Ms. McDougall's bailiwick, so I'm letting her have some time to go and bring up the relevant original bylaws and compare the 2.
Yes, so in terms of the definitions should be consistent between the zoning bylaw and the parking facilities bylaw, which is why no proposes are being changed there. The change comes in with regards to an instance where a secondary suite and a boarding use are within a principal building. And I would ask you maybe to refer to that image in the report that kind of helps explain the principal building, principal unit, boarding use, and secondary suite. That 6 unrelated persons is to apply only in instances where there's a boarding use and a secondary suite within a principal building. So separate from the definition of boarding use altogether, which is why there's no proposes being changed there.
Thank you,
if I may, Chair?
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
I apologize. This was a misunderstanding for me. I'm surprised. I was hoping that we would have changed the boarding use to 6 unrelated persons, whether there's a secondary suite or not. That's what I thought we were doing as part of the setting of the principles, and I apologize. I may have misunderstood the setting of those principles. Is it too late to change that, or would that be something that would have to come forward at a future time?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'm not going to say it's not possible right now. Just it's given us a change to the areas outside of the suite changes that we're making. It might be appropriate to bring it back at a separate time, just because I think we want to try and make sure we're being as clear as possible on the secondary suite changes. I'll turn to staff to see if there's a mechanism here by which we would like to do that. I just think that probably that change, to my mind, would just require a little bit of sober second thought and make sure that we're not making those changes without some consideration. I think the limit there would be 5 unrelated people if it's not a suite, because you would have your primary family of 3 and then 2 boarders. So I think that would be 5 without the changes. And I guess the nanny still would probably still have that. So it may still be 6 even with that piece. But the boarders themselves, I think I said essentially maximum 2 boarders outside of the family unit and the caregiver. So perhaps without delving into the details, Councillor Zelka, are you, I'll go back to you. If you wish to give some direction for those additional pieces to be considered, we can certainly look at it. I would probably suggest we deal with the matter in front of us and then figure some way of asking staff to come back with some options on the non-suite situation as you're describing.
No, I agree with you. We'll deal with the matter at hand and then ask for options for possible changes later. I apologize. I did not quite understand what with respect to the boarding use. I thought it was for both secondary and non-secondary situations. But thank you. We'll ask maybe a motion arising for possible changes or options come forward later.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. And I would suggest no apologies required. This is a lot of moving parts with a lot of different bylaws, and appreciate the attention to detail that you're providing to this. So definitely no apologies required on those pieces. So we want to make sure we're getting this right, as close to right as we can before we go to public hearing. So right now we have the parking facilities bylaw as amended, which is as written, but it's strict with the under the conditions column, sections B and C are removed. So it just leaves the requirement for the bicycle piece in there. Is there any other discussion on the first and second reading of that portion? I do not see, so I will call the question. All those in favor and those opposed. This is the parking. This is the whole. So I have Councillor Appleton and Green opposed. And now Councillor Ney, I sort of said after that, I had first and second reading. I think you were considering a motion of sort of referring this and the other bylaws back to staff for consideration of changing all of this to change the process attached in a way that would. I'll leave the wording to you, but.
The gist of it is the referral to staff to advise on the bylaw provisions or whatever to the parking facilities lot bylaw or whatever, that there be a requirement to install the bike or scooter covered stall and the electric outlet, and to delete the requirement for on-site parking.
I'm just going to seek some advice on wording on this, but so seeking a referral motion of really this, and it would require probably the other bylaws up for first, second, and third reading, referral back for changes to include those requirements without the variance process. Essentially, is what the ask is. Ms. Morton, I just want to make sure we get as clear a wording as possible before we have a debate on this, because we want to debate the actual motion. Welcome back.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, so I'm just going to get Ms. McDougall's confirmation that I have understood this correctly, but my understanding is that we would be looking at referring the parking facilities bylaw amendment, the driveway access bylaw amendment, and the land use procedure and fees bylaw amendment as proposed back to staff, with the direction as given by council regarding what you'd like to see with respect to the parking.
Yes, that's Ms. McDougall. Can you confirm that those are the 3 items that would be touched on?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and can you be as clear as possible about what you would like to see direct staff to include in that, so we can debate that?
Thank you. So it would be to make a requirement of the secondary suite program to install a bike for eligibility of the secondary suite program to install a bike or scooter covered stall and an electric outlet, and to delete the requirement for on-site parking.
Okay, so that motion is made. Is there a seconder for that motion for referral? I don't see a seconder for the referral motion. I'll give it to the moment here in case there's any pieces.
I'm fine to second it, but I did want to add one more item.
Doesn't work like that. You have to second it as is, and we can have motions to amend. I think we're getting very complicated here, but I also just may need a motion to extend the meeting here soon, but not quite yet. So it's moved and seconded. Go ahead, Councillor Ney. Do you have anything to add to that, or just?
Okay, so it's seconded. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So no, I don't. Well, the argument here is that I'm not in favor of the requirement for on-site parking. I've made the statements why that is so, and so moving forward, trying to keep pace with the trends that are that we're nested in. What we would require with a secondary suite is that they install the bike or scooter stall and the electric outlet to incentivize non-vehicular usages for those residing in the home, and homeowners, if an individual did have a car, they could use the street parking that exists. Those roads are already paved and paid for, and apparently in Oak Bay we have an awful lot of free asphalt for people to park cars. So the intent of this motion is to incentivize increased uptake of active transportation and disincentivize increased uptake of cars.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I have Councillor Zelke, you had your hand up first, and I'll go to Councillor Green. And I think we've got to be very clear here about what the motion to refer and these changes would, what it's achieving that isn't currently, that isn't being achieved under the current motion that's on the floor. Go ahead, Councillor Zelke.
Oh, thank you. I did second for discussion. Unfortunately, I won't be able to support the suggested changes. But and the amendment that I was thinking of adding had to do with generalizing boarding. But I see that the definition of boarding is actually in the zoning that we've already passed. So it may be too late to generalize boarding. I see. So no, I'll just I will not be supporting the amendment, the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. We have a motion to amend or to refer those three bylaws. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
I appreciate what my colleague is trying to do, Councillor Ney, but I will not be supporting this. As I've tried to say, let's keep this simple. This is getting so convoluted and so difficult. Just don't require off-street parking. That's the simple solution, because when you add infrastructure, you add cost. I've looked into a charging station on site in an older home that we live in. It's over $2,000 just to install the infrastructure. That would be for an EV vehicle, by the way. I just think we are getting so hung up on bureaucracy here. I'm sorry, I won't support this either.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Braithwaite on the motion to refer.
Yeah, for similar reasons to Councillor Zelka, I'll be not supporting.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion to refer? Go ahead, Councillor Ney.
Just one thing. I appreciate the trying to simplify things. I do get that, but the installation of electric outlet, from what I heard staff say, it's been deliberately left vague. So I drive an electric car. I know others around the table do too. So there's two kinds of plug-in systems that can be used. One is just a 110 outlet. It costs $100 to get it installed on an outdoor. It's not a huge, it's not a huge expense. It's just an outlet, and that would take care of the electric charging outlet. There is a level 2 charging station that is very expensive, somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000, but that's not a requirement. I think the direction that staff was heading towards was that leave that as an option. The 110 outlet gives you a trickle charge if you're using an electric car, and it easily charges up a bike in a few hours. So it's a good kind of option for people who have the outlet at home, because they just park the car and then when they go use it the next day, or the bike or the scooter, and it's charged up the next day. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I'm just very quickly speaking against the motion to refer, and not, I think the intention of the motion is exactly in alignment with where I'm at. I think we just want to make this as fairly straightforward as possible, and what we have right now I think is a very workable model. It moves the yardstick, allows for an easy waiver, and but allows for an enforcement mechanism if that isn't installed. So I think it actually strikes a reasonable balance, and I think the referral, it scares me a little bit in that it might open up a can of worms that comes back at the public hearing and confuses what we're going to be debating at the public hearing, and then has the risk of pushing this into the next, into sort of post-October, which I don't think anybody here wants. So I feel very strongly that we need to move things forward in as clean a way as possible. It may be suboptimal in that we may, after 2 years, find that it's more cumbersome than it needs to be and it can be changed again, but I think I'd much rather see it move forward in a clean and explainable way. I can go to the public and say that very easily. You have a requirement for a parking spot, but don't worry, if all you have to do is show that you can securely lock up a bike and you get it waived, and it's that simple. So I think that's very understandable to the public. So I'm not supportive of the motion to refer, not because I don't support the intention. I just think it puts at risk the whole for the benefit of a very modest and possible improvement that I think we can review in a couple of years if it's not working well. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to speak in opposition to the amendment motion that's on the floor. Similarly, I don't disagree with the intention of what's being proposed, and it's not in my nature to oppose getting more information about how we could potentially reword the language to avoid the requirement for off-street parking. But at this stage of the game, at this juncture, having had much debate around the table on the merits and impacts of off-street parking, the key value for me right now is simplicity and moving forward to get this in front of to a public hearing in front of the public and to get this process concluded. So that's my perspective at this point. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I have Councillor Patterson wishes to speak before I get to the question. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I also will not be supporting the motion. I understand the intent. I would like to see this move forward as expeditiously as can be. We've already fully debated so many of these things. Staff have come back with recommendations. I think the proposed amendment, the amendment that passed, is a good move forward. But I think that if we are trying to keep revisiting this to get to perfection, it's very difficult to achieve. We can come back and amend this at a future date. So for that reason, I can't support the proposed amendment.
All right, it was a motion to refer technically, but yes, I get the piece. So we have, I think we've had a majority of people speak in opposition, but the motion to refer is on the table, is to refer the 3 bylaws for staff input on possible changes. I will call the question now, not seeing any other hands. All those in favor of the referral? I have, and then those in opposition? I have Councillor Patterson, Appleton, Zelka, Green, Braithwaite, and Murdoch opposed. That motion to refer fails. Thank you, though, for that piece. We now are on. We've now completed second reading at this point. We are in place to call third reading. So I think just for procedurally here, I think we have an amended motion that's sitting here. People can. Now, as amended, we're going to call the question of the third reading, and then it'll be set aside for adoption following the public hearing. So we're going to call the question on third reading of the amended Parking Facilities Bylaw Amendment number 4823/2022. All those in favor of the amended and those opposed? I have Councillor Appleton and Green opposed, so that carries. We move on to then secondary suites. Oh, I need to just have a motion to extend the meeting by, say, 20 minutes.
I'll move that we extend 20 minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. I don't think we'll need all that time, but we'll try. Can we have the driveway access bylaw amendment be read for first and second time?
Secondary suites driveway access bylaw amendment number 4826/2022 be given first and second reading.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? There's no earlier discussion, so I don't see there being pieces that people want to pull out, but it's the opportunity. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I would just vote in opposition to the motion on the table, just because, as staff have indicated, it's tethered to the parking requirement laid out in the parking bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Green?
Thank you, and I'll add my voice to Councillor Appleton's. I will also be opposing this motion because it's tied to off-street parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the driveway access bylaw amendment? I do not see any. I will then, I think, just in the interest of having an oppositional viewpoint on the record here, I will speak in support of the motion. I think the bylaw pieces here they're minor. They just essentially provide the ability for staff, should someone not decide to put in a bike parking and decide to add it as a parking, it just allows for reasonable widening of that entrance to make sure that because it's difficult to have tandem parking when you have a tenant. It just allows for people to look at those cases on the case-by-case basis and manage that at a staff level. And so I think it's a reasonable approach instead of it coming to council every time. So with that, I'm going to, any other discussion on that? Not seeing any, I'll call the question then. This is first and second reading for driveway access bylaw amendment. All those in favor? And those opposed? I have Councillor Appleton and Green opposed. And then we have looking for third reading.
I'll move third reading of 4826/2022.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Green and Councillor Appleton are registered as opposed. And then we move on to the land use procedures and fees bylaw.
I'll move the land use procedures and fees bylaw amendment number 4824/2022 be given first and second reading.
Moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Thank you. Now, Councillor Zelka, you had indicated you wish to change the one fee from $500 to $250. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And whatever wording is appropriate to affect that.
I think that's sufficient. Because it's a number. They explained it as a 50% reduction, but at the end of the day, in the bylaw, it is a number. I'm just going to confirm that, Ms. McDougall, that the motion to amend that fee from $500 to $250 is in order.
Yes, that's correct.
Sorry, it's always awkward when people call on you out of the blue and you have to scramble for that mute button. Thank you for that clarification. So that is moved by Councillor Zelka. Is there a seconder for the motion to change the?
Second.
Moved and seconded. So the amendment that's on front of the floor right now is to change that number. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to support this, but I think I would have really felt more comfortable that we would have stayed at the 500 until we really know what staff time is, because it's hard to go back and make it more money after the fact. So I think at a minimum we do have to have, as staff said, minimum cost recovery. For this, I'm wondering if $250 will be enough to cover the staff costs for this, because I think if it isn't, then we're going to be in a position where people without secondary suites are going to wonder why we're kind of, giving a bonus to people with a secondary suite for not having to pay what they should be paying for the service. So if we could have a clearer idea on what the cost is, it would be great, but obviously we can't get that tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I think in fairness to Mr. Bull, I don't think we have that information. No, we don't really have a sense. So in some ways, this is a bit of an abstract policy piece. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you. I don't usually get the chance to rub it in, but if we didn't require off-site parking at all, we wouldn't have to worry about fees and time and effort on the part of staff. So we wouldn't have that additional burden. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Zelka, your hand is still up there. Did you wish to speak?
Yes, actually, I wish to motivate on my motion.
Yeah, sorry, I
appreciate it.
Got distracted by hands waving in the room here, so go ahead.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate the solidarity of council as we support the majority position taken by the body. So moving forward, I agree. We don't know the exact dollar figure. I do look forward to maybe in about 2 years hence to a monitor process where we can actually revisit the fees. We do have a process where we revisit a whole number of other fees, and I do notice the fees generally go up. So it is possible that when we have a better idea of the relatively straightforward, simple process for this DVP, with now only a single condition, that it will be relatively straightforward for staff to do and relatively inexpensive, and as a result of trying to minimize, shall we call it, if some are referring to this as a barrier, I certainly want the barrier to be nominal, but at the same time have an opportunity for staff to share with the newcomers to Oak Bay what are the expectations built into our bylaws. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I don't see any other hands. Motion to amend is live on the floor to change the number. I'll just speak very briefly in favor of this. I do think a fee is appropriate. I do think that the requirement for the variance does give, as Councillor Zelka pointed, a touch point and an enforcement mechanism to ensure that active transportation is built. I think the fee is nominal. $250 in the scheme of a substantial, building of a secondary suite is really not anything, and I think I do also feel it would cover certainly the majority of the costs and majority of the cases, just given the fact that there is no notification, no other pieces in the criteria are essentially, do you have it? Yes, and process the paperwork. So I'm supportive of the reduced amount. I do want to make this barrier as low as possible. So the motion to amend the number from $500 to $250 is on the floor. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? And any opposed? Councillor Green is opposed. Okay. You don't need to speak to it. We just called the question. So we have an amended land use procedures and fees bylaw. We've done first and second reading as amended. So is there any other amendments or changes that people wish to see before I move to third reading? Do not see any, so I'll look for a motion for third reading. Sorry, good question. I've called first and second reading. I know we had an amendment on the live motion, so sorry, we're still on second reading as amended. My apologies. Thank you. It's just 5 minutes past the 3-hour mark. My brain just goes. So we have an amended motion in front of us for second reading, first and second reading. I see no more discussion on the amended motion. All those in favor? And those opposed to the amended motion? Councillor Appleton opposed and Councillor Green opposed. And so that passes.
I'll move third reading of the amended bylaw 4824/2022.
Second.
That's third reading. We've already had our discussion as amended. All those in favor and those opposed, Councillor Green and Councillor Appleton register as opposed. Then moving on to the last item here, the building and plumbing bylaw.
I move amendment number 4827/2022 be given first and second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on 4827? Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much. Just a quick question through you to staff. Since this alternate bylaw process is still relatively new, I just wanted to know, is there going to be any onerous aspect with respect to staff being able to sort of deal with this? Or will there be training required of staff in terms of some of the modifications that have been done to the building code? I just wanted to have some idea in terms of how staff will be getting ready, or if they're not already ready to deal with this alternate building code application.
I'm not sure who to give that question over to. Perhaps Ms. McDougall.
Sure, I can take a first stab at it, and then perhaps anyone else can jump in if they want to add. I think a couple things to this point. So in terms of implementation, we're not anticipating any barriers or additional training. We're leaning a lot on what other jurisdictions have done and adopted in terms of taking those provisions that are clearly laid out in the building code and just using those to form a tool that we can use to analyze permit applications as they come in. So we're not anticipating too much there. I'm sure there will be some more discussion about that in the operational discussions that we have in the coming month. But at this point, we're not anticipating too much of a burden on staff or additional training being required.
Thank you for that. Councillor Zelka, anything else?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. That's all I want to know.
Thank you very much. So we have first and second reading for building and plumbing bylaw amendment. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And then we have third reading. Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Now we appear to be completed that session. Is there anything else that people wish to raise before I move on to the next item on the agenda, which is new business and adjournment? I don't see any. So, Councillor Zelka?
I apologize. Just one quick question. So what we just passed had to do with getting an occupancy permit for a new secondary suite. I didn't see where we had the occupancy permit or the paperwork with respect to the existing secondary suites. If only if staff could maybe point out where that was, because I didn't really see that portion.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Certainly a fair comment, since it's tied to a building permit process that the inspection normally happens. So to staff, perhaps you can speak to that. I'm assuming if people make changes, if there's an existing suite, quote unquote, when it's brought to code, that's the occupancy permit process when they undertake a building permit. Is there any other touch points where an existing suite would have that occupancy permit granted other than the application?
Yes, I can take a first stab at this one, and perhaps Dan can add to it a little bit as well, or Mr. Wong. If you look at section 18, we would be adding wording to clarify that an occupancy permit would be required for new construction with a suite, whereas a final inspection report would be required for renovation of an existing house. So that wording is being considered with those bylaw amendments, but again, perhaps Mr. Wong can add some additional clarity there.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, we've been in discussions with the building inspector, and it's our understanding that for an existing house, they would have had their occupancy permit, when the house was constructed. Say it was in the 1950s, and so they're coming in, as you mentioned, Your Worship, they're coming in for a building permit to renovate that house to add the secondary suite. And so our understanding from the building inspector is that they would not be issuing an occupancy permit for that renovation because that had already been given. But they would be providing final inspection report. So it is only upon new construction for a brand new house that if it did have a secondary suite, they would achieve an occupancy permit. But if it was an existing renovation, it would only be a final inspection report as identified in the bylaw text.
Wong, for our clarification, under that 18.4, it speaks to alterations to existing buildings to add a secondary suite. Well, we talk about existing suites, realistically, because nothing officially has a secondary suite right now, they're all captured under that wording. Is that an accurate assessment? So they would undertake a final inspection report? Or
that's correct, Your Worship. That was the intent of that language.
Okay. And one more question, if I may?
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
So I understand then for an existing building that maybe already has a kitchen in it, potentially a secondary kitchen, it's a relatively straightforward renovation, say, and so an occupancy permit may not be required in that case. However, there's that other paperwork, the owner's declaration of secondary suite. I understand that would be required regardless.
Mr. Wong?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Whether there's an occupancy permit needed or not.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. I think that concludes. I am very much looking forward to, I'll say a couple of words that I'm very much looking forward to the public hearing on this, and very grateful to the enormous amount of work as seen by the size of this report and presentation to fix all the various bits and pieces and find a model that I think will have a fair bit of support from the community going forward. So thank you for that. Look forward to September. Is there any new business? Seeing none, I will just look for a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. with enthusiasm. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great summer break. Thank you very much to staff. I hope you all have a